Hey everyone, welcome back to Omni Wizard. Get ready for an amazing tale. What if Harry Potter had Wolverine's claws and every curse made his core stronger? Smash that like button and subscribe for more. Here we go. Chapter 1, Bone and Blood. The first time the claws came out, Harry was 4 years old and Dudley had cornered him behind the garden shed with a stick. Not a wand, just a stick. Dudley wasn't magical. He didn't need to be. He had 70 pounds on Harry and the absolute conviction that nothing bad would ever happen to him. Because nothing bad had ever happened to him. He swung the stick like it was a sword and he was a knight, and Harry was whatever knights were allowed to hurt. The stick caught Harry across the shoulder, then across the ear. Harry's back hit the shed wall and the wood was rough and splintery and smelled like old rot, and Dudley raised the stick again with a grin that took up his whole pink face. Something tore through the skin between Harry's knuckles. 3 points of white bone, sharp as the edge of a broken plate, punched out of his right fist, then 3 more from his left. Harry stared at them. Dudley stared at them. For one long, suspended moment, nothing moved except a bee wandering through the garden on the other side of the shed. Dudley screamed so loud the neighbor's dog started barking. He ran. He ran like something was chasing him, which technically something was. Harry followed him out from behind the shed because he didn't know where else to go, but mostly Dudley ran because he was Dudley and he was scared. And when Dudley was scared, he made as much noise as possible until someone else dealt with the problem. The claws slid back in. It hurt. Not a lot, more like the ache of pressing a bruise. A deep internal pressure that lasted about 2 seconds and then faded. Harry stood in the back garden holding both his hands up in front of his face, turning them over, looking at the smooth, unbroken skin between his knuckles. There was a little blood, not much. It was already stopping. He had no one to tell, so he didn't tell anyone. Aunt Petunia, when Dudley had finished screaming his version of events through great hiccuping sobs, grabbed Harry by the arm and dragged him to the cupboard under the stairs. She didn't say what she was punishing him for. She didn't need to. The punishment was a reflex. Something had upset Dudley. Harry was nearby. Harry went in the cupboard. It was as simple and as unjust as weather. In the dark, sitting on the thin mattress with his knees pulled up, Harry pressed his knuckles together and concentrated. The claws came out slow this time. Deliberate. He'd done it on purpose, and something about that made the whole thing feel less like a disaster and more like a discovery. He ran the tip of one claw against the wall of the cupboard, and it left a thin white groove in the plaster. He could feel it, not pain, just pressure, like extension of himself, like his hand reaching further than hands were supposed to reach. He pushed them back, waited, brought them out again. By the time Petunia opened the cupboard door 2 hours later to put his dinner plate down, beans on toast, gone cold, one edge of the bread already curling, Harry had figured out how to do it quietly enough that the skin didn't tear at all. He didn't use them again for almost a year, not because he was afraid of them. He just didn't need to. Life in the cupboard under the stairs had its own rhythms, and Harry had learned them the way you learned anything, through repetition and necessity. He went to school where he was mostly invisible. He came home where he was mostly a problem. He ate what was left after Dudley had taken what he wanted, and he slept on the mattress that smelled like damp, and he did his homework sitting on the kitchen floor because the cupboard was too small for a desk. He was not by any measure a happy child, but he was a functional one. The second time the claws came out was at school. Marcus Finch was 13 and Harry was 5, and Marcus had a habit of taking things from smaller kids on the playground. Nothing interesting, just their dignity. The casual kind of theft that happens when a boy is too big and too bored and there's no one watching. He'd taken Harry's lunch bag, picked through it, eaten the one apple Petunia had included and threw the rest in the bin. Stood there with apple juice on his chin, waiting to see if Harry would cry. Harry looked at him for a long moment. Then he put his hands in his pockets, turned around and walked away. The claws were already out by the time he got his hands in his pockets. He walked with them pressed against the inside of his jeans, feeling the fabric strain slightly, and by the time he'd rounded the corner of the building and was out of sight, they were gone again. He hadn't used them on Marcus. He'd thought about it. The thought had been very clear and very specific. He could imagine exactly where they'd go, the soft meat of Marcus's forearm, the way the boy would drop the lunch bag and make a sound. He could imagine it with perfect precision. He chose not to. He was 5. He had already learned more about restraint than most adults ever would. The years moved the way years do when you're miserable, sluggishly, like wading through cold mud. Until suddenly you look up and you're 10, and then you're looking down at a pile of birthday cards that all have Dudley's name on them, and somehow it's your birthday and you're 11, and the letters start coming. The letters were the first interesting thing that had happened since the claws. Petunia's face when she saw the first one, Mr. H. Potter, the cupboard under the stairs, 4 Privet Drive, was the most satisfying thing Harry had ever witnessed. She'd gone the color of old chalk and snatched it so fast she'd gotten a paper cut and hadn't even noticed. The second letter came the next day, then a dozen. Then they started coming through every gap in the house. The mail slot, the gap under the back door, the fireplace, and Vernon loaded everyone into the car in the middle of the night and drove them to a shack on a rock in the middle of a gray, storm-hammered sea. Harry sat in the corner of the shack and thought, someone wants to talk to me badly enough to chase me across the country. He found that he was not afraid of this. He found that he was, in fact, the most awake he'd felt in years. The giant knocked the door off its hinges at midnight. "Harry Potter," Hagrid said, holding an umbrella and looking around the shack like he was confirming an address. "Thought I'd find ya here." Vernon put himself between Hagrid and the room with the particular brand of authority that large men use when they've forgotten that authority is a social convention, not a physical one. "I'm warning you," Vernon said. "Get out of my house." "Not your house," Hagrid said cheerfully. "Rock in the middle of the sea, and yet can't technically own a rock. Happy birthday, Harry." He held out a box with a slightly crushed birthday cake inside. Harry took it. "Sit," Hagrid said to Vernon in a tone that was still cheerful but had developed a subterranean firmness, the way rivers sound friendly right up until you realize how fast they're moving. Vernon sat. Harry opened the box, extracted a piece of cake, and ate it standing up while Hagrid explained the wizarding world to him. He didn't interrupt. He didn't exclaim. He listened with the focused, evaluating attention of a person who has been waiting for an explanation of their own life and is going to make sure the explanation is worth the wait. "So the claws," Harry said when Hagrid paused. Hagrid blinked. "The what now?" Harry held up his right hand and brought the claws out. Slowly, deliberately, 3 bone-white points emerging from the skin between his knuckles. No tearing, no blood, just the quiet, controlled extension of something that had always been there. Hagrid stared, his great mouth opened. Nothing came out. "I've had them since I was 4, Harry said. "They retract." He brought them back in. "I heal fast, too. Dudley threw a rock at my head last summer and the cut was gone in about 30 seconds. Hagrid was still staring at his hand. "Harry," he said finally in a very different tone than before, That's not standard, that's not something we see." "I know. Have yet told, has anyone?" Harry put his hands back in his pockets. Nobody asked. The leaky cauldron was loud and smelled like tallow, and something sharp that Harry would later identify as the particular scent of magical excess. The ozone and wood smoke that hung around anywhere spells were regularly cast. Every head turned when Hagrid ducked through the door. Then they turned again faster when they realized who was beside him. Tom the barman dropped his glass and didn't notice. "Is that Merlin's beard? Is that Harry Potter?" An old witch with a hat piled improbably high grabbed his hand with both of hers. "Dear boy, we're so glad, we never dreamed there were more of them." They came out of corners and from behind tables, and one man tripped over his own stool. Harry shook hands and gave short, polite answers and looked at everyone with the same clear, measuring attention he'd used on Hagrid and on Vernon, the same attention he used on everything, because the world was full of things that could hurt you if you stopped paying attention for even a moment. After the 7th person, Hagrid steered him gently through the crowd to the back door. "Sorry about that," he muttered. "Shoulda warned ya." "It's fine," Harry said. "Why are they like that?" Hagrid looked at him sideways. "What do you mean?" "They're scared of me," Harry said, not accusing, just observing. "Some of them are, the rest are, I don't know, relieved about something." Hagrid pushed the door open to reveal the brick wall that was not a brick wall. "That's Harry, there are things about what happened to with you-know-who, Voldemort." Hagrid winced so hard his shoulders went up to his ears. "People say you-know-who, I know I'm saying Voldemort." Harry watched the bricks move aside to reveal Diagon Alley, bright and crooked and improbable, and felt something unlock in his chest that he hadn't known was locked. What's there to be afraid of in a name? Hagrid had no good answer for that, so they went shopping. Gringotts first. The vault was deep under the earth, and the goblins moved with a precision that Harry respected immediately. They didn't fuss. They didn't perform, they just operated the system with professional exactness. Harry noted the security, the dragon in the lower vaults, the enchantments, the goblin guards with their flat-eyed professional assessment. He also noted that the key to his vault came with a small sealed letter in Dumbledore's handwriting that Hagrid slipped back into his pocket and thought Harry hadn't seen. Harry saw, he filed it away. The gold was more than he'd expected. He took what he needed and no more. Madame Malkin's robes, then the bookshop, then the apothecary, where Harry spent a long time looking at the ingredients in the jars and asking questions that made the shopkeeper check twice whether this was really an 11-year-old. Then the wand shop. Ollivander's was quiet in the way that quiet has weight stuffed with it, the walls of boxes pressing in, the dust moving in patterns that might have been random and might not. Ollivander himself was already at the counter when they entered, as if he'd heard them coming from the street. "Mr. Potter," he said, and his pale eyes went to Harry's face and stayed there. "I wondered when I'd be seeing you." "Hello," Harry said. "I remember every wand I've sold, Mr. Potter." Ollivander drifted out from behind the counter. Your father mahogany 11 inches excellent for transfiguration, your mother willow 10 and a quarter swishy and good for charms work. He paused, and I remember the wand that well, you know. He looked at Harry's forehead. Harry waited. But before we get to that, Ollivander said, I'll need your wand arm. The process took longer than Harry expected. Box after box, every wand doing something wrong, a shower of sparks that smelled like burning metal. A vase exploding. One wand that emitted a sound like a brief indignant shout and then went still. Ollivander kept disappearing into the stacks and coming back with something new, and his expression moved from professional interest to something else, something more careful. Curious, he murmured after the 23rd wand. He was looking at Harry's hands. May I? Harry held out his right hand. Ollivander turned it over gently, examining the knuckles. He didn't say anything about the faint scarring that wasn't quite there, the nearly invisible topography of the skin between the joints. 11 inches, Ollivander said softly to himself. Holly, phoenix feather core. He turned to the wall to a single box near the very end. One phoenix gave 2 feathers. 2 feathers became 2 wands. This wand's brother, its counterpart, gave you that scar. He held out the box. Harry took the wand. It was warm. The warmth wasn't like holding something that had been heated. It was internal, a pulse, like the wand was recognizing something in him. The golden light that erupted from the tip lit the whole shop, and somewhere in the street outside a pigeon startled off a ledge. Curious, Ollivander said again, but his voice had dropped. He was looking at Harry the way the people in the leaky cauldron had looked at him, not afraid but aware. Like he was looking at something that didn't quite fit the category he'd tried to put it in. Yes, this one. Harry lowered the wand. Why curious? Ollivander studied him for a long moment. The wand chooses the wizard, Mr. Potter, but occasionally, very occasionally, one encounters a wizard whose nature is such that the choosing becomes a very complicated matter. He tilted his head. You have power of your own, ancient, pre-verbal. The wand felt it and decided to introduce itself rather than compete. Harry looked at the wand. All right, he said. Indeed, said Ollivander, and for the first time in the conversation, something that might have been respect entered his pale eyes. Indeed. Platform 9 3/4 was chaos in the organized way that things are chaotic when everyone involved knows exactly what they're doing and is simply doing all of it at once. Harry found the pillar, walked through it without hesitating, Hagrid had explained, and Harry saw no reason to doubt the explanation and came out on the other side into a wall of noise and steam and scarlet. He was staring at the train when someone nearly knocked him down. Sorry, have you seen a toad? Neville's lost his toad, brown thing, terrible at staying put. A girl with an enormous quantity of brown hair and an equally enormous pile of books had appeared beside him. She was scanning the crowd with an efficiency that suggested she had probably already memorized the platform layout. No toad, Harry said. You're starting at Hogwarts. Yes, first year, Hermione Granger. She held out her hand with the brisk confidence of someone who'd read enough books about making good impressions to have made peace with just cutting to it. I've been practicing spells all summer. I've managed the locomotion charm and 2 different transfiguration starters, although I couldn't test them properly because my wand isn't supposed to be used outside school. Harry Potter. She stopped. Her eyes went wide. Then she did something unexpected. She recovered almost immediately, nodded once, and adjusted her grip on her books. Right, she said. Sorry, I know who you are. I've read about you, obviously, in The Rise and Fall of the Dark Arts and a few others. She paused. They're not very accurate, are they, the books? I just found out I was a wizard yesterday, Harry said. Oh, she processed this. That must have been an enormous amount to take in. It was interesting. She looked at him with sudden, sharper attention, like something in his phrasing had caught her notice. Before she could say anything, a red-headed boy appeared at Harry's other side, slightly out of breath with a smear of something on his nose. The toad's on the train, he announced to Hermione. Carriage 3 on top of the luggage rack. He noticed Harry. Oh, hi, I'm Ron Weasley. Harry Potter. Ron's ears went red. Blimey, he said. Really? Really? Have you got can I see? Ron pointed at Harry's forehead with the specific awkwardness of someone who realizes mid-gesture that they're being rude and can't stop themselves. Harry pushed his fringe back. The lightning bolt scar was silver and faint, easy to miss. Ron stared at it for about 3 seconds, then clearly decided that staring at it was worse than the asking, so he stopped. Brilliant, Ron said. Sorry, Mum says I'm not supposed to make a big deal of it. It's fine, Harry said. Shall we get on the train? They got on the train moved. England went past the windows in autumn greens and grays. Ron taught Harry about wizarding cards. Hermione corrected 2 of Ron's explanations about the cards. Ron did not take this personally because Hermione was correct, which he appeared to find more annoying than if she'd been wrong. Harry watched both of them and thought, yes, these ones. He couldn't have explained exactly what he meant by it, some things you just know. The sorting was the first moment at Hogwarts where Harry felt the full weight of collective attention. The hat sat on his head and said into the inside of his skull in a dry, papery voice, "Interesting, very interesting. There's courage here, good lord, there's something else here too, something that doesn't have a category in my usual assessment. Then don't put it in a category," Harry thought back. A pause, "You know what you are. Getting there, you'd do well in any house, technically. But you already know which one you want, don't you?" Harry didn't answer. He was watching the hall from under the brim of the hat, the floating candles, the 4 long tables, the faces turned toward him. "Gryffindor," the hat announced. The table erupted. Harry walked to it, sat down between Hermione and the ghost with the ruff around his neck who introduced himself as nearly headless Nick and picked up a fork. He was eating by the time Dumbledore stood at the head of the hall. The headmaster was exactly what Harry had expected from the half-formed impression he'd built over the day. Tall, ancient, with an attention that managed to feel warm and calculating in the same moment. He looked at the students with the eye of a man who genuinely cared about them. He also looked at them with the eye of a man who was running very large equations in which they were variables. His gaze settled on Harry twice during the opening speech. The second time Harry met it directly, Dumbledore's expression didn't change, but something shifted in it, slight as a change in the wind. Harry went back to his food. The dormitory was shared with 4 other first-year Gryffindors. Ron, Neville Longbottom, who had recovered his toad and named it Trevor. A boy named Dean Thomas who talked confidently about football to another boy named Seamus Finnegan who talked confidently about anything that exploded. Harry lay in his bed and listened to them settle and didn't feel alienated by any of it. He was used to sleeping in small spaces near other people's noise. The cupboard under the stairs shared a wall with the living room and Vernon fell asleep watching television with the volume up. This was louder than the television but more friendly, which was an improvement. He was almost asleep when Ron said quietly from the next bed, "Hey, Harry, can I ask you something?" "Yes." "Those things Hermione was saying on the train, about your magical core being unusual. She said she'd read about cases where wizards had, extra things, physical things." A pause. "Is that true for you?" Harry considered the dark ceiling. He brought the claws out, held them up in the dark. The faint light from the window caught the bone tips. He watched them for a moment, then let them slide back. "Yes," he said. Ron was quiet for a bit. "Does it hurt?" "Not really." Yeah, another pause. "That's actually really cool." Harry smiled at the ceiling. He hadn't smiled like that, unguarded, unplanned, in a very long time, maybe ever. "Get some sleep," he said. "Right, yeah, good night." Good night. The first week of classes moved quickly. Transfiguration with McGonagall, who turned herself from a cat into a professor in one fluid motion, and then stood at the front of the room with the air of a person who has precisely 0 patience for time wasting and is prepared to demonstrate this with a grade. Charms with Flitwick, who fell off his stack of books when he called Harry's name and seemed genuinely delighted by the whole situation. History of Magic with Binns, who was a ghost and didn't appear to have noticed. Herbology in the greenhouses, where the soil smelled like earth and magic both, where Neville came alive in a way that was startling if you'd only seen him in corridors, quick and confident with his hands among the plants. And then, potions. Snape came into the dungeon the way weather comes. You don't see it arrive, you just become aware that the temperature has changed. He looked at the class from the front with an expression that managed to convey both contempt and profound boredom in equal measure, which was a genuine achievement. His gaze landed on Harry the way a hawk lands on a fence post. "Potter," he said, "tell me, what would I get if I added powdered root of asphodel to an infusion of wormwood?" Hermione's hand went up beside Harry like a flag. "I'd get the draft of living death," Harry said without looking up from the notes he was making. "It's one of the most powerful sleeping potions known in the wizarding world. Asphodel in the asphodel family has, from what I've read, a kind of folkloric significance around death and mourning. I'm guessing the name's not accidental." Silence. Hermione's hand came down slowly. Snape stared at him. "Where would you look if I asked you to find me a bezoar?" "Stomach of a goat. It's an antidote for most common poisons." "And what is the difference between monkshood and wolfsbane?" "They're the same plant," Harry said, "also called aconite, highly toxic in the wrong quantities and useful in several advanced potions and some defensive preparations." He looked up. "Is this the section where you try to catch me out, or should I keep going?" The class had gone perfectly silent. Snape's expression was a remarkable thing, the collision of wanting to punish someone and being unable to locate a legitimate reason. His jaw worked slightly. 10 points to Gryffindor," he said, in a tone that suggested each word cost him something. "Don't be clever, Potter, it ages poorly." "I'll try to be careful," Harry said. Snape swept to the front of the class and began the lesson with an energy that suggested he was working something off. Hermione leaned over to Harry's ear. "How did you know all that?" "I read a lot on the train." She stared at him. "We were on the train for 6 hours." "Long books," Harry said. She opened her mouth, closed it. opened it again, closed it. Turned back to her cauldron with the slightly overwhelmed expression of someone who has just realized they may have found, for the first time in their life, a person who reads faster than they do. It was the defense against the dark arts class that changed things. Quirrell taught Dada in a turban and a stutter, both of which seemed slightly theatrical on closer inspection, not the stutter itself but the rhythm of it, the way it appeared more pronounced at certain moments and less at others, calibrated rather than involuntary. Harry noticed this during the second class and said nothing. He also noticed that Quirrell's eyes, during the brief moments the man forgot to arrange them correctly, were not quite afraid of the students. They were assessing them. Today, Quirrell said, arranging his notes with a slight trembling in his hands that was probably real, W will be looking at first-year jinxes. The knockback jinx, Flipendo. Very simple, very C-controlled, partners please. Harry paired with Ron, Hermione paired with Neville. Across the room, Draco Malfoy paired with his satellite Crabbe and did his jinxes with lazy, precise competence, the kind that comes from having had private tutoring for years. He caught Harry watching him and curled his lip. Harry watched him for another moment, then turned back to Ron. Ready? Ron said. He was holding his wand with visible enthusiasm. Go ahead. Ron cast Flipendo. It connected. Harry stepped back half a pace. The jinx hit his chest and he felt it, a burst of warmth that moved through him like a wave, like stepping into a hot shower, and then it was gone and he was standing there with his robes slightly displaced. He felt not stronger exactly, more solid, like something had added itself to the existing architecture. He'd felt this before from smaller things, a bumped spell in the corridor, a backfire from a misfired transfiguration. Every time the same warm absorption, the same small accretion. He thought he cast Flipendo at Ron. Ron went back 3 feet and laughed and cast it again. Across the room, Quirrell was making his rounds. He stopped near Harry and watched him take the jinx from Ron a second time, and something passed across his face that was there and gone in an instant, something sharp and attentive, completely at odds with the trembling hands and the stutter. Harry caught it. He met Quirrell's gaze for one brief moment, blank and neutral. Quirrell moved on. After class in the corridor, Draco appeared at Harry's shoulder with 2 large pieces of furniture. Potter, he said, I think we started badly. My offer at the start of term, I remember it, Harry said. I think you'd find that associating with the right people. I've got people, Harry said. You've got a Weasley and someone who reads too much. Draco's voice was smooth, calibrated to sound like casual conversation. I'm offering something more, Draco. Harry stopped walking, turned to look at him directly. You've got nothing I want. Draco's face tightened. I wouldn't be so sure of, actually, Harry said, and something in his voice had changed, not threatening, just precise, the way a blade is precise. I'd be careful. You're about to say something you can't take back, and I think you know it, which is why you've been standing outside this conversation for about 30 seconds trying to figure out whether it's worth it. Draco stared at him. It isn't, Harry said. He picked up his bag. See you around. He walked away. Crabbe and Goyle looked at Draco, who looked at Harry's retreating back, and his expression cycled through several things before settling on something complicated, not anger, something more like recalibration. Ron fell into step beside Harry. What was that about? He's deciding what to think about me. And I thought I'd help him decide. Ron considered this. Is it weird that I find that more intimidating than if you'd threatened him? Probably not, Harry said. That night, Harry sat at the table in the common room long after everyone else had gone to bed. The fire had burned down to embers. Transfiguration as it was done. His potions notes were organized. He had charms reading that Flitwick had assigned, and he'd already done it. He was thinking about the warmth. Every curse made his core stronger. He'd figured that much out. He didn't know the mechanism, whether it was his mother's sacrifice restructuring his magical core or something inherent to whatever mutation had given him the claws or some intersection of both. But he could feel it, each time, the accumulation of something. He thought about what that meant. If he kept absorbing, kept growing, there was no visible ceiling. There was no point at which the core said, that's enough, we're full. It just kept adding. Kept building. It was the most interesting thing about himself and also the most dangerous, and he held both of those truths without any particular drama. He'd been living with dangerous, interesting things since he was 4 years old. He brought the claws out, rested his right hand on the table, and looked at them in the ember light, bone white, slightly curved. He ran the tip of one across the wood of the table, gently, barely touching, and watched the thin groove it left. He was 11 years old. He had a wand, a vault full of gold, and 2 people who'd spent a week's worth of mealtimes making space for him at their table without being asked. He thought about the Dursleys. About the cupboard, about the shape of a life that had been designed to make him small. Something about that made him put the claws away. He put his books in his bag, banked the fire the way Hermione had showed him with a dampening charm, and went to bed. He slept without dreaming. In the morning, Hogwarts was waiting. Chapter 2, The Sharpest Student. The Owl arrived on a Tuesday. Harry was eating breakfast and half listening to Ron explain the finer tactical points of wizard chess, a game that apparently involved pieces that genuinely hated each other, which Ron seemed to find charming, when a large barn owl dropped a package in front of him so precisely it didn't disturb his toast. Inside the package was a note in Dumbledore's handwriting, "Please come to my office at your earliest convenience." Lemon drop. Harry read it twice, folded it, set it beside his plate. "What's that?" Ron asked. "Invitation from Dumbledore." Ron's eyebrows went up. "Already? You've been here 2 weeks. Apparently that's long enough to be interesting." Harry pocketed the note and reached for his pumpkin juice. "Finish telling me about the bishop." Ron blinked, then grinned, because Ron was the kind of person who found it easy to be delighted when someone he liked showed genuine interest in something he cared about. He finished explaining about the bishop, who according to Ron was, and this was a direct quote, an absolute maniac in the end game. Across the Great Hall at the Slytherin table, Draco Malfoy was watching Harry with the focused, evaluating attention of someone doing math. Harry had noticed Draco watching him every morning for a week. He didn't acknowledge it. Acknowledgement would give Draco something to work with, and Draco was clearly still in the process of deciding what approach to take, which meant the most effective move was no move at all. Let him calculate. Let him come up with nothing. Hermione sat down across from them, set 3 books on the table, and started talking about their upcoming transfiguration assessment before she'd poured her juice. "McGonagall wants us to transfigure a match into a needle by Friday," she said, "which is actually quite advanced for first years. The key is the visualization. You have to hold the end shape completely before you start the incantation, otherwise you get a partially transfigured match that's sharp at one end and flammable at the other, which makes a terrible needle and a mediocre weapon," Harry said. "Exactly. Well, yes," she looked at him. "Have you already done it?" "Last night. The match into a needle." "Match into a needle and then the needle into a match again, which is apparently harder. McGonagall's textbook mentions reverse transfiguration in Chapter 7. Hermione set her juice down. "We haven't been assigned Chapter 7. "I know." She looked at him for a long moment with an expression that Harry had started privately cataloging as Hermione processing Harry, a recurring event that seemed to involve genuine intellectual friction on her end, like a very good computer encountering a variable it hadn't accounted for. "Right," she said finally. "Good, that's efficient." She opened her first book with perhaps slightly more force than necessary. Ron caught Harry's eye and did something with his face that somehow communicated both "I find this funny" and "I will absolutely deny finding this funny if asked." Harry looked back at his breakfast. McGonagall's classroom was the kind of room that felt like a test before you sat down. The desks were exactly aligned. The blackboard was immaculate. Everything about the space said, "This is a place where things are either right or wrong," and McGonagall herself said it louder than any of it. "Transfiguration," she said, looking over the class on Monday morning, "is not merely a skill. It is a discipline. It requires the simultaneous engagement of intention, visualization, magical output, and material understanding. Failure in any one of these components will produce." She gestured at the board where she'd drawn a diagram that somehow managed to look both scientific and vaguely menacing, "incomplete results." And in transfiguration, incomplete results are frequently more dangerous than no result at all. She looked at Harry, then at the rest of the class. Then at Harry again, in the way that teachers look at students they've already earmarked for closer attention. "Wands out, matches on the left side of your desk." The class began. Around Harry, matches sparked, smoked, occasionally shot off the desks with small panicked trajectories. Neville's match turned briefly into something with legs before it became a match again. Seamus's match caught fire, which at least demonstrated that he understood one half of the equation. Harry looked at his match. He turned it over once between his fingers, the wooden body, the red head, the weight of it. Then he thought very clearly about a needle, the slender taper, the cold gleam, the tiny eye, the specific weight distribution of thin metal against the pad of a finger. He tapped his wand to the match. It became a needle. He gave it about 3 seconds. Then he did the reverse incantation from memory and it became a match again. He did it 3 more times, match, needle, just to make sure he had the feel of both directions. McGonagall was at his desk when he looked up. She looked at the match that had been a needle and was a match again in his hand, then at him. "Show me the reverse," she said. He demonstrated. Needle to match, match to needle. McGonagall was silent for a moment that stretched slightly longer than comfortable. Then she said, "The reverse transfiguration is a third-year technique. I know it's in Chapter 7. We are on Chapter 3. I was curious about Chapter 7. McGonagall's mouth tightened. Not in anger, Harry had gotten good enough at reading her to know the difference. This was the tightening that happened when she was suppressing a reaction she decided was unprofessional. 10 points to Gryffindor, she said. Tomorrow you'll read Chapter 9. I already read Chapter 9. The silence this time was different. Mr. Potter, she said very precisely. What exactly is the last chapter you have not read? Harry considered. I think I stopped at 18. There's a section on human transfiguration that gets ethically complicated. She looked at him for a full 3 seconds. Then she turned back to the class with the composure of a woman who had been teaching for 40 years and had decided this qualified as a later problem. The rest of you, she said, her voice absolutely steady, are still on matches. The thing about Hogwarts was that it was never quiet in the way that rooms are quiet when nothing is happening. It was quiet in the way that old forests are quiet, full of things moving just at the edge of perception, old magic soaked into the stones, staircases that changed direction based on what appeared to be personal preference, portraits that held whole conversations with each other and went silent the moment a student came too close. Harry liked it. He liked it the way he'd liked the cupboard, in the specific sense that he'd learned to use confined spaces well. He explored the castle the way he'd explored his own limits methodically without drama filing things away. The trick stair on the 3rd step from the bottom. The corridor on the 2nd floor that was longer on Tuesday than it was on Wednesday. The bathroom on the 4th floor where the taps were inexplicably hot and ran with something that wasn't quite water. He was in that corridor on a Wednesday night 2 weeks in, reading his charms textbook against the wall while the castle settled around him when he heard Quirrell. Not the public Quirrell, not the stuttering, slightly damp professor who fumbled his chalk and jumped at loud noises. This Quirrell was moving through the corridor below with a particular quiet that was practiced and deliberate, and he was talking low and fast and without a trace of a stutter, into what appeared from Harry's vantage point, a gap between 2 stones where the floor didn't meet the ceiling, to be the inside of his own turban. More time. The defenses are complex and I need to understand the dog before we can. A pause. As if someone else was speaking. I understand your impatience, Quirrell said, and his voice had something in it that Harry recognized from years of listening at doors and around corners. The particular placating tone of someone who was afraid of the person they were talking to. But the Potter boy he's not what we expected. There's something about his core that I can't. Another pause. Yes, I saw it in class when the jinx hit him. A longer silence. I'll be careful. His footsteps resumed, moved away. Harry waited until they were gone and then sat with his back against the cold stone and thought. So Quirrell had noticed. And the thing Quirrell was talking to, whatever lived in the turban, whoever required that careful, frightened tone, had an opinion about it too. Interesting. Harry went back to his charms reading. He had a theory now, and theories needed more data before they became certainties. He could wait. The defense against the dark arts classroom had a particular smell that Harry associated with inconsistency. Quirrell burned particular incense that was supposed to be protective and was actually just expensive. And underneath it the room smelled like chalk dust and the specific cold stone scent of the dungeon-adjacent corridor. The combination was slightly off. The way a note played slightly flat is off. You might not know consciously, but your body registered it. Today's class was more advanced than the first. Quirrell stood at the front with his hands folded and explained the leglocker curse with a thoroughness that was actually impressive, the theory clean, the wandwork notation detailed. The leglocker curse, he said, binds the target's legs together at the knees. Non-violent, relatively non-harmful, useful for subduing an opponent without engagement. Who would like to demonstrate? Several hands. Quirrell let his gaze travel around the room and settle with the appearance of randomness on Harry. Mr. Potter, if you'd come up, please. Harry closed his notebook and went to the front. Quirrell gestured to a spot about 10 feet away. You'll be the target if you don't mind. The curse is mild enough for practical demonstration on a fellow student. Fine, Harry said. He didn't change his stance. He stood the way he always stood, balanced, easy, no visible tension, and watched Quirrell select a student to cast. He chose Draco, which was interesting in itself. Draco came up with the particular smooth readiness of someone who'd been waiting to be called on and had already rehearsed the moment. He cast the leglocker curse. Perfect form, clean incantation. It hit Harry in the thighs and the warmth came in a wave, the familiar deep-water heat of absorbed magic, and then it was done and Harry was standing exactly where he'd been standing, unmoved, unlocked, perfectly normal. The class was silent. Draco stared at him. Harry looked at his own legs, back at Draco. Try it again, he said. Mr. Potter, Quirrell started. It's fine, let him try again. Draco's jaw tightened. He cast again, harder this time, snapping his wand with the sharp motion of someone who has been told they have natural precision and has spent years making sure they live up to it. The curse hit. Harry absorbed it, stood there. Once more, Harry said pleasantly. Potter, Draco said, and his voice had lost its calibrated smoothness, stripped down to something more immediate. What are you? I just want to make sure we're seeing the same thing, Harry said. He turned to the class. Is everyone seeing the same thing? The class was very definitely seeing the same thing. Ron had both hands pressed flat on his desk like he was physically restraining himself from saying something. Hermione had her quill motionless above her notes. Neville appeared to be trying to become part of his chair. Quirrell stepped forward. His hands were still folded. His expression was carefully, professionally neutral. Very interesting, Mr. Potter. It seems your natural defenses are quite robust. That's not uncommon in certain rare. What made you choose that particular curse for the demonstration? Harry asked. Quirrell blinked. It's a standard first year. You spent most of last class on the knockback jinx. Today you jumped ahead 4 chapters and went straight to a targeting curse. Harry tilted his head. I'm curious about the pedagogical reasoning. The silence in the room changed quality. It wasn't just students watching a teacher get questioned. It was students watching a teacher get caught, except most of them were too young and too new to recognize the distinction. Quirrell's smile stayed exactly where it was, which was itself a kind of tell. Thank you, Mr. Potter, you may sit. Harry went back to his seat. As he sat, he felt Quirrell's eyes on him with a weight that had nothing to do with academic interest. He opened his notebook, continued his notes. Under the heading Dada, Leglocker Curse, he wrote, absorbed no effect, core warm for approximately 90 seconds after. And then below that, Q knows. Q is reporting to something else. Need more information about the turban. Draco found him after class. This was becoming a pattern. What was that? Draco said. He'd pulled Harry into an alcove off the main corridor with the practiced authority of someone accustomed to having private conversations in semi-public spaces. Crabbe and Goyle stood in the corridor mouth like 2 pieces of furniture. What was what? Harry said. Don't. Draco's voice was sharp and low, none of the performance to it. The curse didn't work on you. I cast it perfectly. I know I cast it perfectly and it didn't work. Harry leaned against the alcove wall. Your form was good, really. It's not your casting. Then what is it? Harry looked at him. Why do you want to know? Because I don't like things I can't explain. Draco held his gaze, and there was something in it that Harry hadn't expected to find there, not malice, not arrogance, but a kind of fierce, almost anxious need to understand. The expression of someone who has organized the whole world into categories and found a thing that doesn't fit. Harry said, What would you do with the explanation if I gave it to you? Draco's eyes narrowed. What? If I told you exactly what happens when a curse hits me and why, what would you do with that information? The question landed in the space between them, and Draco clearly hadn't expected it, because his prepared responses didn't have an answer for it. He was clever, genuinely clever, not just the performative cleverness of someone who'd been told they were smart, and clever people need a moment to recalibrate when the conversation goes off their prepared script. I don't know, he said finally, which Harry suspected was the most honest thing Draco Malfoy had said in weeks. Then come back when you do, Harry said, and we can have a real conversation. He walked out of the alcove. Crabbe and Goyle moved aside because they'd learned in the first 2 weeks of school that it was easier to move aside for Harry Potter than to be the thing he walked around. Behind him, he could hear Draco thinking. The sound of it was the absence of the usual snide comment, the silence where a dismissal should have been. Hermione caught up to him by the library. I've been doing research, she said, which was how Hermione began approximately 40% of her conversations. On what? On you. Well, not on you specifically, on magical mutations, physical manifestations of magical cores. She held up 3 books. One of them was very old and had something dark and unidentifiable on the cover. There are historical records. It's rare but not unheard of. The magical core expressing itself physically, enhanced healing, augmented senses, occasionally. She dropped her voice, structural anomalies. Oz, Harry said, yes, well, the books call them osseous extensions, but yes. She pushed the library door open and they went inside. The interesting part is the absorption. I haven't found a record of that in anything first-year accessible. There are references in a 6th-year dark arts defense text to a property called inversus damnum, inverse damage, where the magical core converts hostile magical energy into fuel, Harry said. She stopped. Yes, exactly. She looked at him. You already worked this out, most of it. How? I can feel it, Harry said. When a curse hits, there's a warmth, then I feel more. Like something's been added. He pulled a chair from the nearest table and sat backwards on it, arms crossed over the back. I've been keeping notes on how long the warmth lasts and whether it corresponds to the strength of the spell. She sat across from him. She had her quill out in under a second. And does it correspond? Yes, the knockback jinx gave me about 30 seconds. The leglocker curse in Quirrell's class today gave me 90. She was writing. Her handwriting was extremely small and extremely precise. So more powerful curses produce more core fuel, more of whatever the absorption process yields. Right. Do you have any sense of how much you've accumulated? In terms of baseline versus current. Harry thought about the first night in the Gryffindor common room, the ember light, the claws. Significantly more than when I arrived, he said. It's not like a number I can see, it's more like, when you've been sleeping badly for weeks and then you finally get a real night's sleep, that compound recovery feeling, it's like that except instead of rest, it's magical combat, Hermione said. Yes, she looked at him over the top of her notes. Harry. I want to say this carefully because I don't want it to sound like I'm being dramatic. A breath. This could make you one of the most powerful magical entities in recorded British wizarding history, eventually, if it compounds without a ceiling. Harry met her eyes. I know, that doesn't worry you, he thought about it genuinely. Should it? Most people would find it at least a bit overwhelming. Most people spent their childhood being told they were worthless, Harry said without particular weight, just as a fact. I spent it figuring out what I was. It's a different starting point. Hermione held his gaze for a moment. She had very sharp eyes, always had, probably always would, and she used them here, looking at him the way she looked at a complex equation that turned out to have a surprising solution. The kind of look that was respect and awe and slight frustration in equal measure. Right, she said quietly, then more briskly, we should document this properly if you're willing. Systematic exposure to controlled spells of increasing strength, measured intervals. I'm willing, Harry said. But not yet. There's something I'm watching first. Quirrell, she said, and he looked at her sharply. She shrugged. I noticed it too, his stutter is inconsistent. And the way he looked at you during the demonstration was, she searched for the word, acquisitive. Yes. What are you going to do about it? Watch, Harry said. For now, she nodded slowly. Then she pulled another book from her stack and set it in front of him. In the meantime, Chapter 14, Compound Core Behavior in Magically Unique Individuals. I think you'll find it relevant. He pulled the book toward him. You've already read it. Twice, she said. Take your own notes. I want to compare. October arrived like a mood shift, the air sharpened, the lake went from gray-green to steel, and the castle started smelling like wood smoke and something colder underneath. The staircases got more difficult in a way that felt deliberate, like the building itself was getting restless. In Charms, Flitwick introduced the Wingardium Leviosa to the class with the enthusiasm of a man introducing his favorite piece of music. Swish and flick, he squeaked, demonstrating with his tiny wand. Feel the movement, the wrist, people, the wrist is everything. Around the room, feathers wobbled, listed sideways, fell off desks. One feather near the window went up fast and slapped the ceiling and fell back down. Ron's feather was doing nothing at all, though Ron was doing an energetic version of the motion. Harry's feather rose smoothly to about 2 feet, hovered, then descended when he lowered his wand. Well done, Mr. Potter, Flitwick squeaked. Perfect, 5 points to Gryffindor. Now can you do it without the incantation? The class went quiet. Without the incantation, Harry said. Try, Flitwick said with the expression of a man who has just had a hunch. Harry looked at the feather he thought about up. He felt the magic in him, which was more than it had been, noticeably more, the ongoing accumulation of 2 weeks of classroom jinxes and practice spells, and he directed it at the feather the way you direct a flashlight, pointed and intentional. The feather rose. Slowly, not perfectly, but it rose, shaking slightly like something being held up by a hand that was still learning to hold. Flitwick made a sound that was somewhere between a squeak and a noise that couldn't be reproduced in writing. He pressed both hands to his cheeks. Oh my, oh well, oh that is class, who can tell me what just happened? He levitated without an incantation, Hermione said, hand up. Nonverbal magic, that's Professor, that's an EWT level. Yes it is, Flitwick said in a very high, very excited voice. Yes, Miss Granger, it is. Mr. Potter, he turned to Harry with the expression of someone who has been teaching for a long time and has just witnessed something they'll be telling the story of for the next 30 years. How did that feel? Natural, Harry said honestly. Like the words are scaffolding for building the spell, but once you've built it a few times, you don't need the scaffolding anymore. Flitwick made the sound again. Extraordinary, absolutely extraordinary, 15 points to Gryffindor. He scurried back to the front of the class, visibly electric with excitement. The rest of you, incantations, please. We will not be skipping foundational steps simply because Mr. Potter has, well, incantations. Ron was staring at Harry. You just did NEWT level magic. Apparently. You're 11, so are you? Yeah, but I can't even get my feather off the desk. Ron looked at the feather, then at Harry, then back at the feather. Teach me. After dinner, Harry said. Ron's face split into a grin. Next to him, Hermione had already written half a page of notes about nonverbal magic theory and was underlining something aggressively. The incident with Draco happened on a Thursday evening, in the corridor outside the library, and it began the way these things always begin, with an audience. Draco had clearly been building to something since the alcove conversation. Harry had watched him all week, assembling and discarding approaches the way a chess player moves through potential lines, and he'd apparently settled on the one approach Harry had been hoping he wouldn't choose. He'd brought people. 6 Slytherins in the corridor, spread out just enough to feel like a statement. Draco in the front with Crabbe and Goyle slightly behind, and 3 older students Harry recognized as second and third years with the carefully constructed boredom of people performing cool rather than experiencing it. "Potter," Draco said, "I've been thinking about what you said, about having a real conversation." Harry was carrying 4 books and had his bag over one shoulder. He shifted the books to his other arm. "I think we got off on the wrong foot," Draco said. "I think you'd find there are advantages to—" "I'm going to stop you there," Harry said. Draco's jaw tightened. "I haven't finished. You're going to offer me something," Harry said. "Protection, probably, influence, access to the right people, in exchange for, I'm guessing, my cooperation on something, maybe just my public association." He looked at the 6 people in the corridor. "And you brought witnesses so that when I say yes, there's already a version of events for people to tell." The corridor was quiet. "What if I say no?" Harry said. Draco's expression had moved from smooth to rigid. "I wouldn't recommend it." "Why not?" "Because," Draco glanced at the older students, "I have friends in positions to make things difficult." "Draco," Harry's voice was flat and patient. "I've been cursed more times in the past 2 weeks than you've been in your entire life, and every time it happens I get harder to hurt. I lived in a cupboard for a decade. I have 3 retractable bone claws on each hand." He paused. "What exactly are you offering to protect me from?" The corridor processed this. One of the older Slytherins, a third year with the look of someone who'd thought this was going to go differently, took a small step back. "Not obvious, but there." Draco said nothing. His face had gone through several colors. "I'll say it again," Harry said. "You've got nothing I want, but—" and here his voice changed, dropped a register, became something quieter and more direct. "If you ever want a real conversation, not a performance, come find me on your own." He walked through the group, not around them. Through the gap that opened before him because people moved, they always moved, the way water moves away from something solid. Behind him, he heard one of the older Slytherins mutter something to Draco. He didn't catch the words. He heard Draco's response, clipped and cold, "Shut up." He told Ron about it over chess that night. Ron listened with the particular focused attention he gave to things he found either very funny or very concerning, and this was both, which meant he kept almost starting to laugh and stopping himself. "You walked through them, there was a gap, because they moved out of your way." "Yes, because they were scared." "Cautious," Harry said. "There's a difference. Move your knight." Ron moved his knight. His chess knight immediately told him that was a terrible move, and Ron told it to shut up. So Malfoy just stood there. "He's regrouping." Harry studied the board. "He'll come at me differently next time, less theater." "What'll you do?" "Delete." Harry moved his bishop. "Check." Ron stared at the board. "How are you always 3 moves ahead?" "I've got a lot of practice thinking about what happens next," Harry said. Ron looked at him across the board with the straightforward, uncomplicated empathy that was the thing Harry had liked most about Ron from the beginning, the way Ron felt things directly and simply without performing the feeling. "The Dursleys," he said. "They're proper awful, aren't they?" "They were what they were," Harry said. "I'll move your queens." Ron moved his queen into a position that Harry had already accounted for, and 2 moves later Ron's king was cornered and his knight was delivering the news in what appeared to be a genuinely emotional speech. "Best of 3, Ron said. "Tomorrow," Harry said. "It's late." He climbed to the dormitory and lay in the dark listening to the castle breathe, and thought about Quirrell and the turban and the warmth in his chest that was slightly stronger today than it had been yesterday and slightly stronger yesterday than the day before. Growing. Compounding. He thought about Dumbledore's unanswered invitation sitting folded in his pocket. He thought soon. Outside the window the lake was black and still, and somewhere below the school 3-headed and ancient and absolute something enormous was breathing in the dark. Chapter 3. What bleeds and what doesn't? The letter from Dumbledore had been in Harry's pocket for 11 days when Harry finally decided to answer it. Not because he'd forgotten. Not because he was avoiding it. He'd simply needed to know more before he sat across from a man who knew everything and had elected to share very little of it. Walking into that office unprepared would have been like showing up to a chess match without having studied your opponent, possible to survive. But why make it harder than it needed to be? 11 days had given him. Quirrell's corridor conversation, the absorption data Hermione was helping him catalog, 17 chapters of additional reading across 6 different texts, 1 confrontation with Draco, and the specific growing certainty that whatever was under the school, he'd heard the 3-headed dog from the 3rd-floor corridor he absolutely wasn't supposed to be on, was connected to the thing Quirrell had been reporting to inside his turban. He went up to the stone gargoyle outside Dumbledore's office on a Sunday morning when the castle was quiet and said, "Lemon drop," because the note had seemed like a hint, and it was. The gargoyle moved. Dumbledore's office was circular and warm and so thoroughly full of things that it managed to feel simultaneously cozy and completely overwhelming. Silver instruments on every surface. each doing something delicate and purposeful, portraits of previous headmasters dozing in their frames, and a bird on a perch near the window that was either very old or very sick or possibly on fire. It was hard to tell. Dumbledore himself was behind his desk, and he rose when Harry came in with the particular warmth of a man who was genuinely pleased to see you and also extremely interested in what you might say. "Harry," he said, "sit please, tea." "Thank you," Harry said. He sat. He took the tea. He looked at the bird, which was definitely on fire, and then at Dumbledore, who was watching him with those bright blue eyes that had the uncomfortable quality of eyes that had seen an enormous number of things and were adding this moment to a very long list. "That's a phoenix," Harry said about the bird. "Fox, yes, he's in the process of a burning day." Dumbledore said it the way you'd say he's having a bit of a Tuesday. Rebirth, painful but ultimately productive, rather like many things. Harry wrapped his hands around his tea. "You wanted to see me 11 days ago." "I did." A pause. "You needed time, I understand." "You understand what specifically?" Dumbledore smiled. It reached his eyes, which Harry noted, but also stayed there, which he also noted. "That you are not the sort of person who walks into a conversation before you're ready for it, that you've been gathering information." The smile didn't change. "As I confess have I," Harry said. "Flitwick told you about the non-verbal magic. McGonagall told me about the reverse transfiguration. Flitwick told me about the non-verbal charm. Professor Quirrell told me," Dumbledore paused, watching Harry, "that the leglocker curse appeared to have no effect on you." "What else did Quirrell tell you?" If Dumbledore was surprised by the directness, nothing in his face showed it. He settled back in his chair with the ease of a man comfortable with the unexpected. "Why do you ask?" "Because Quirrell is reporting on me to something that lives in his turban," Harry said. "And I'd like to know whether you know about that and have a reason for leaving it in place, or whether this is new information." The office was very quiet except for the soft crackling from Fawkes and the delicate tick-hiss of the silver instruments. Dumbledore looked at Harry across his desk for a long, measuring moment. "How did you hear this?" he said at last. "Corridor below the second floor 3 Wednesdays ago, approximately 10 at night." Harry set down his tea. He wasn't being careful. Or he didn't think anyone was close enough to matter. Dumbledore's expression was doing something complex. It was the expression of a man doing a very rapid recalculation while simultaneously maintaining a surface of calm, which was impressive, technically speaking. "Harry, you know what's in the turban," Harry said, not a question, a pause. "I have suspicions." "So do I." Harry picked up his tea again. "Is the thing under the school connected to it?" The silence stretched long enough that it became its own answer. "I'd rather," Dumbledore said carefully, "that you not concern yourself with what's beneath the third-floor corridor. It's being handled." Harry looked at him. "By you." "By the relevant parties, yes." "And am I not a relevant party?" Dumbledore's hands, folded on his desk, stayed perfectly still. "You are 11 years old." "I know how old I am," Harry said. "I also know what I can do, and I think you know it too, which is why we're having this conversation in your office instead of a letter and why you let 11 days pass without sending a follow-up." He held Dumbledore's gaze. "You were seeing what I'd do with the time." The pause this time was different. Not the pause of a man buying time, the pause of a man revising something. "Yes," Dumbledore said simply. "I was." Harry nodded. "I'm not going to promise to stay away from things that are relevant to my own safety," he said. "I'll be honest about that, but I also don't need to go looking for trouble right now." He stood. "I just need to know you're aware of what's in that classroom." "I am," Dumbledore said quietly. "Very much so." Harry picked up his bag, then stopped. "One more thing, the letter to my vault, the one Hagrid took back into his pocket, he thought I hadn't seen it." Dumbledore's expression didn't change, but something behind it recalibrated. "That was a matter of school policy regarding. It had your seal on it," Harry said. Not angry, just precise. "Whatever you took from the vault before I got there, that's what's under the school, isn't it?" Another silence. "Good morning, Professor," Harry said and went out. He descended the spiral staircase and walked back to Gryffindor Tower in the quiet Sunday castle and turned everything over in his mind like stones, looking at the underside. Dumbledore was not his enemy. He was also not entirely his ally. He was something more complicated, a man who cared about outcomes and managed people toward them with genuine love and genuine manipulation in measures that were probably equal. He would protect Harry. He would also use him. He'd built this whole situation, whatever the thing in the turban was trying to do, whatever the trap under the school was protecting, and he'd positioned Harry in the middle of it while calling it education. Harry thought, fine, he could work with complicated. Complicated was the water he'd learned to swim in. He went to find Hermione and Ron. He found them in the common room, and the first thing Ron said was, "Troll." Harry stopped. "What? There's a no, I mean there was a troll in the dungeons." Ron was slightly out of breath, which was the only sign of agitation he'd allowed himself since he'd apparently been working on projecting composure this week. Quirrell came into the Halloween feast and said there was a troll in the dungeons and then fainted, which, bit theatrical, Harry said. Bit theatrical, Ron agreed, but also there's actually a troll. Where's Hermione? The two of them looked at each other. She doesn't know about the troll, Ron said. She's been in the bathroom on the second floor all afternoon. She was upset. Malfoy said something to her earlier about her being, about reading too much, being boring, something horrible and stupid. And she, right, Harry said and picked his bag back up. Harry, which bathroom? The castle was emptied out by the time they made it to the second floor. Everyone heading away from the dungeons in the directed movement of a crowd following instructions. Prefects steering students with the urgent energy of people who'd been given a job and were going to do it properly. Harry moved against the flow without rushing, Ron behind him with the look of a person who had decided a thing and was committed to it even though the thing was objectively dangerous. They heard the troll before they saw it. The sound was fundamental. The sound of something very large and very stupid existing with enormous force, heavy footfalls that came up through the stones of the floor, a low grumbling that wasn't quite a voice and wasn't quite not one. The bathroom door at the end of the corridor was slightly open. Harry stopped at the corridor's edge. The troll was approximately 12 feet tall. It was carrying a club that had been a tree not long ago and had not improved in the conversion. Its skin was the color of old cement and its smell preceded it by about 10 feet in every direction, the concentrated stench of something that had never encountered the concept of hygiene and would not have been interested if it had. It was also, Harry noticed, between them and the bathroom door. Hermione's inside, Ron breathed behind him. Harry, I know. Harry set his bag down against the wall, rolled his right shoulder once, loosening something. Stay back. I can help. Stay back, Harry said, quiet and clean, not harsh, just absolute. He stepped into the corridor. The troll heard him immediately. The great boulder of its head swung around and its small red eyes found him with the predatory instinct of something that was used to being the most dangerous thing in any given room. It made a sound like a boulder deciding to be a rock slide. Harry brought the claws out on both hands, not slowly, not theatrically. Clean and fast, the bone-white points emerging with the specific quiet of long practice, and he held both fists at his sides and looked up at 12 feet of concentrated stupid violence. The troll swung. Harry moved. Not back, sideways, and then forward inside the arc of the club before it finished its swing, and he put both sets of claws into the troll's forearm as he ducked under its elbow. The troll screamed. It was not a sound Harry enjoyed. It was too big, too immediate, reverberating in the stones and in his chest. But he moved away from it before the club reversed, already calculating the next angle. The troll was powerful and it was fast in the specific way that very large things are fast, not nimble but committed, each movement involving so much momentum that stopping it was harder than avoiding it. He avoided. The club hit the floor where he'd been and cracked the stone, and the troll wheeled around with its arm streaming something dark and too thick to be blood. And Harry was already on the other side, and he vaulted off the wall, one foot on the stone, one hand braced, using the troll's own turning momentum, and put his right-hand claws into the back of the troll's knee. The troll's leg buckled. Not all the way it caught itself, went down on one knee, but it was enough, the head dropping toward Harry's level, and Harry did not hesitate. He drove both sets of claws into the stone floor on either side of him, full extension, and the stone cracked and he held himself braced between two hands of claws and did a controlled front kick directly into the troll's nose. The troll's eyes crossed. It sat down. The impact of 12 feet of mountain troll sitting down on a corridor floor shook the building like a small earthquake, and the portrait screamed, and 2 suits of armor fell over, and a torch came off its bracket and landed sizzling on the wet stones. The troll sat in the rubble of its own impact and made a low, confused sound, like the building deciding it didn't want to be a building anymore. Harry stood up from his landing crouch and looked at it for a moment. He retracted the claws, the knuckle skin smooth and unbroken, not even a mark left, and exhaled once, a very controlled breath. Behind him, Ron made a sound that would become famous in their friendship for being the most compressed expression of simultaneous relief and awe he was ever capable of. The bathroom door opened. Hermione Granger stepped out with her robes dusty, her hair more chaotic than usual, and her eyes red in a way that had nothing to do with trolls and everything to do with the 2 hours she'd spent in there before the troll arrived. She looked at the troll, at Harry, at Ron, at Harry's hands, specifically at his knuckles. "Is it dead?" she said. "Unconscious," Harry said. "Knocked it out." She looked at the troll again, at its arm. "You cut it." "Yes, with the claws." "Yes." She stood with this information for a moment. Then she looked at Ron, who was still pressed against the corridor wall with his wand out and an expression like someone who had front row seats to something they would be telling people about for decades. "Hermione," Harry said, not urgently, quietly. "Are you all right?" she snapped back to him, her jaw moved, the red around her eyes was still there. "I'm fine," she said. "What he said was stupid, and I know it was stupid, and I shouldn't have. I'm fine." "What Malfoy said was stupid," Harry agreed, "and I'll have a conversation with him about it." "You don't have to." "I know I don't have to." Harry picked up his bag from where he'd left it against the wall. "It's not for you, it's because he should know what happens when he talks like that." She looked at him for a long moment with the same expression she'd had in the library, the one that was recalibrating. Then she said very quietly, "Thank you." Running footsteps at the end of the corridor, McGonagall arrived first, white and precise. Snape behind her, and his eyes went to Harry and then to the down troll and then back to Harry with something moving rapidly through them that Harry filed away because there wasn't time to read it now. Quirrell came last. His turban was slightly askew and his hands were shaking. He looked at the troll and then at Harry, and his expression went through two things in the same second: the professional distress of a Dada professor arriving late to a troll incident, and underneath it, that same acquisitive attention. "Sharp and fast and gone." "Explain," McGonagall said, looking at the three of them. "There was a troll," Harry said. "I can see that." Her voice was desert dry. "What I mean is, Hermione was in the bathroom and didn't know. We came to get her." He looked at the troll. "The troll got between us and the door." McGonagall looked at the troll, at its arm, at the cracked stone around it. "And you dealt with it," Harry said. McGonagall opened her mouth, closed it. She looked at Snape, who was still looking at Harry with that unreadable intensity. She looked at Quirrell, who was looking at the troll and seemed to be cataloging something. She looked at the three first years, Harry, composed, Ron, barely keeping it together, Hermione, clearly emotional but not going to show it with this many teachers present. 5 points each to Gryffindor, she said finally, for looking after a fellow student. A pause. "And 5 points from each of you for being out of the feast when told to shelter in the dormitories." She looked at Harry one more time. "I'll want a full account tomorrow, Mr. Potter." "Of course," Harry said. As the teachers organized the removal of the troll and the repair of the corridor, Harry caught Snape watching him once more. Snape noticed him noticing and looked away with the deliberate smoothness of a man who has decided a tactical retreat is not a defeat. Quirrell didn't look at Harry again. He didn't need to. The calculation was already done. November arrived cold and structural, pressing the color out of everything beyond the castle windows. The lake became a mirror of gray sky, and the grounds were hard and frostbitten, and Quidditch practice was conducted in the kind of wind that had opinions. Harry had made the Quidditch team in the third week of October, Gryffindor Seeker, the youngest in a century, which Hermione had looked up in 2 separate record books to confirm, and Ron had then told everyone he met for approximately 4 days. And practice meant Thursday evenings on the pitch with Wood, who approached broom drills with the methodical intensity of a general planning a campaign. Harry liked Wood. He liked the uncomplicated, passionate relationship Wood had with the game, the way it existed for Wood as a pure thing, a closed system with comprehensible rules and achievable excellence. Harry flew the way he'd done everything since he was 4, like he'd been practicing longer than anyone knew, like his body understood the mechanics before his mind had finished the theory. The Nimbus 2000 responded the way good tools always respond. Exactly. "You're the best natural flyer I've seen," Wood said after Thursday's practice, watching Harry descend. "In 10 years of playing, you're the best natural I've seen." "Good," Harry said, landing. "What's the opposition like?" Wood blinked at the directness. "Slytherin, they're Malfoy's their new Seeker. His father bought the whole team Nimbus 2001s. He said it with a careful neutrality that meant he was angry about it. "Newer doesn't mean better," Harry said. He handed the Nimbus back to Wood for storage. "When's the first match?" 3 weeks. "Then we've got time." He was pulling his gloves off when he heard it, from beyond the stands, from the base of the stands, the specific acoustic quality of a conversation being held in a place that wasn't being listened to, except that it was. Snape's voice. And Quirrell's. Harry finished pulling his gloves off, tucked them in his pocket, and drifted toward the sound like he was just walking back to the castle. "Can't keep doing this, Severus," Quirrell said, and the stutter was gone, not the mild inconsistency Harry had noticed before but entirely gone, his voice smooth and collected. "What I'm doing requires." "What you're doing," Snape said in a voice colder than the November air, "is going to get you killed. And before that happens, it's going to get students hurt. Your concern for the students is touching. Don't." The word came out with an edge that cut clean through. "Don't make this about sentiment. I know what you have inside that turban, Quirrell. I know what it wants. And I know that whatever bargain you've made with it is going to collapse the moment it stops needing you." A pause. "Keep away from Potter," Snape said. Or I will take an interest," Snape said, "in exactly what's been happening in your classroom and your evening walks and the third-floor corridor on the nights it hasn't been locked properly." A very deliberate pause. "I am very thorough when I take an interest, Queerness." Harry was behind the stand by now, back against the wood, not breathing. "You're bluffing," Quirrell said, but there was something in his voice that wasn't confidence. Something thinner. "Have you," Snape said quietly, "ever known me to bluff?" Footsteps. Snape's precise, unhurried, moving away toward the castle, then Quirrell's less certain, a hesitation in them. Harry waited until both sets of footsteps were gone, then he stood in the cold under the Quidditch stands and looked up at the sky, which was doing nothing helpful, and thought. So Snape knew. And Snape was, in his specific, aggressive, unpleasant way, keeping Quirrell off Harry's back. Which meant Snape was not the threat in this situation. Which meant every instinct Harry had developed in potions class, the tautness, the assumption of hostility, needed adjusting. Not trusting, adjusting. There was a difference. He went back to the castle with his hands in his pockets and his claws, as always, precisely where he needed them. He talked to Draco the next morning. Not a confrontation, not a performance. He found Draco alone in the library after breakfast, genuinely alone, which was apparently how Draco spent an hour each morning before his friends arrived, reading wizarding political theory and making notes in small, neat handwriting, and sat down across from him without asking. Draco looked up. "Potter, Malfoy," Harry set his books down, "what you said to Hermione." Draco's expression locked down, the shutters going up with the speed of practice. "I say a lot of things to a lot of people. You told her she was boring and that reading too much was the reason no one liked her." Harry kept his voice level. "You did it in front of people so she'd have to perform not being hurt by it." Draco's jaw moved. "She's a muggle-born who don't," Harry said. The word wasn't loud, it wasn't threatening, the way Snape's had been threatening in the cold outside the Quidditch stands. It was just final. Draco stopped. "I'm going to say something and I need you to actually hear it," Harry said. "Not the version where you're already forming a response. Hear it." He waited a beat. "Hermione Granger is my friend. What you did to her was small and cruel, and you did it because you'd run out of angles on me and she was available." He looked at Draco directly. "You're smarter than that, you know you're smarter than that, which means you chose to be small on purpose, and that's worse." Draco said nothing. His notes were still open in front of him, his quill was on the page. "I'm not going to threaten you," Harry said. "I'm going to tell you how things are. You come at her again with words, with anything, and whatever calculation you're running about me gets a definitive answer. Do you understand?" Draco's eyes had gone very still. There was a lot happening behind them, the same quality of intensive recalibration that Harry had seen before, except this time it had a different character. Not defiance, not fear, something more like reluctant, grudging reassessment. "She really is your friend," Draco said finally, not sneering, almost wondering. "Yes, not because she's useful, not because she's clever, she's your friend." "Yes." A pause. Draco looked down at his notes, then up. "My father would call that sentimentality." "I know." Harry picked up his books. "Your father's wrong about a lot of things." He left Draco sitting alone in the library with his political theory books and his quill motionless on the page. And whatever he was thinking it for a very long time, because when Ron and Hermione arrived at the library an hour later, Draco was still there. The first Quidditch match of the season was on a Saturday, the sky the kind of iron gray that threatened rain without committing to it, and the stands were full. Harry was in the air before the whistle finished blowing. There was something clarifying about flying. The ground-level world, Quirrell's divided attention, Snape's Cold War management of the situation, Dumbledore's calculus, all of it dropped away when he was on the broom, and what was left was simple and clean. Find the snitch, catch it before Malfoy don't die. He spotted Malfoy across the pitch on his 2001. Malfoy was a competent flyer, genuinely competent, which Harry respected even as he noted that competence and instinct were different things, and Malfoy had one more than the other. The game opened. The Slytherin beaters were aggressive from the first second, targeting the Gryffindor chasers with the organized cruelty of a team that had been drilled hard and had specific orders. The bludgers came at angles from unexpected directions, and Harry found himself watching the whole pitch at once, the snitch not yet visible, Malfoy shadowing him at distance, the bludger pattern below. He felt it before he understood it. Something wrong, not in the air around him, inside. Something pulling at his broom, the way a current pulls at a boat, subtle and insistent. A deviation from straight and true. He compensated without thinking, muscle memory adjusting, but the deviation kept returning, stronger on each correction. His broom started to buck. He held on. Below in the stands he could distantly hear the crowd shift from cheering to something more alarmed, and he didn't have the attention to spare for it. He was using everything to keep the broom under him, the wild lurching increases, and through the wind blur he was calculating. This is not equipment failure. This is deliberate. Someone is jinxing the broom. His claws came out. Both hands right there on the broom handle, the bone-white points pressed flat against the wood as he gripped. Not because they'd help him fly, but because the physical grounding of them, the specific sensation of them extended and present, Settled something in his core the way planting your feet settles your balance. He breathed through the bucking and let his magic go wide, outward, feeling the air around him, and there, below and to the right in the stands, a figure muttering with focused, unbroken concentration, not blinking, he locked eyes on the figure through the chaos. Snape. Harry held very still on the bucking broom and looked at Snape and let the information land. Snape was concentrating hard, murmuring something with the specific stillness of a sustained spell, not blinking across the stands. Something disrupted Snape's concentration. Hermione, Harry realized later, who had figured it out too, and had done something involving a small fire in Snape's robe that broke his focus exactly long enough for the jinx to collapse. The broom stabilized. Harry rolled it into a controlled dive and came out of it 40 feet lower, cruising, reassembling the picture. Snape had been countering a jinx, not casting one. The sustained murmur was a counter curse. Whoever had been jinxing the broom had started it before the match, and Snape had noticed. And Snape had been holding the counter curse for however long it took to keep the broom from dumping Harry into the pitch at speed. And now the jinx was broken because Hermione had set his robe on fire, which had broken his concentration, which had collapsed both the counter curse and whatever the original jinx had been fighting against, and the broom was free. Harry looked up. The snitch was 40 feet above him, hovering against the gray sky with the disinterest of something that existed outside the human drama below. He put the broom straight up. Malfoy saw it, reacted, pointed his 2001 up after him. Too late. Harry was already there. He had the snitch in his right hand, claws fully retracted, the small gold wings beating uselessly against his fingers, and he was descending in a controlled spiral while the crowd made a sound like a weather event. He landed in the middle of the pitch, opened his hand, and the snitch sat in his palm for a moment before it began to struggle again. Wood was screaming. The team was screaming. The Gryffindor stands were an entity of pure noise. Harry closed his hand around the snitch and looked up at the stands, specifically at the place where Quirrell was sitting with his turban and his arranged expression of academic interest. Quirrell was already looking back. Harry held his gaze for a moment, then he walked off the pitch. That evening, the three of them sat by the common room fire after the celebration had moved to the dinner table. And most of Gryffindor was celebrating the win with the kind of enthusiasm that required volume and quantities of food. Ron had a diagram of the match spread out on the table in front of him. He'd drawn it from memory, all the bludger paths and positions, which was impressive, and was reconstructing specific moments with the analytical joy of someone who finds tactics genuinely thrilling rather than just useful. The jinx was on the broom before the match, Hermione said. She'd been quiet for most of the celebration, which meant she'd been thinking. Which means whoever cast it was up in the stands before kickoff. I thought it was Snape until I realized he was holding it, preventing it from working. Yes, Harry said. So Snape was protecting you, Ron said, with the specific discomfort of someone whose opinion needs realigning. In his way. Harry stretched his legs out toward the fire. Quirrell jinxed the broom. Snape noticed and spent the whole match running interference. A pause. He got his robe set on fire for it. Hermione pressed her lips together. I didn't know that when I know, Harry looked at her. You saw someone you thought was hurting me and you acted immediately. That's not a mistake. I should have. You had about 4 seconds, Harry said. You made the fastest read you could with the information available. That's all you can do. He looked at the fire. We just have more information now. Ron chewed on this. So Quirrell's definitely the one, yes. And the thing in the turban, yes. A pause. The fire crackled. Outside the common room, the sounds of celebration drifted down the corridor in waves. Harry, Hermione said carefully. After today, the broom, the match, Quirrell knows that you know, or at least suspects it. He's going to adjust. I know, so what do we do? Harry looked at the fire for a long moment. The gold of it moved. He thought about the conversation with Dumbledore. I'd rather you didn't concern yourself, and the cold professional competence of Snape in the dark outside the Quidditch stands, and the warmth in his chest that was larger than it had been a month ago, larger than it had been yesterday. Nothing, he said. Yet, Ron looked at him. Nothing, not nothing. Harry reached forward and moved one of Ron's drawn Quidditch pieces to a different position on the diagram. Everything is still in place. Quirrell's still watching me, the thing in the turban is still making plans, the trap under the school is still holding. He tapped the piece. If I move now, I accelerate their timeline. They'll go for the stone faster if they think I'm coming. He looked up. So I let them think I don't know yet. Hermione was quiet for a moment. Then that's actually exactly what Dumbledore would want you to do. He'd use this moment to, I know, Harry said, but I'm not doing it because Dumbledore would want me to. I'm doing it because it's right. There's a difference. Ron and Hermione exchanged a look. The look said several things that were probably best expressed across a look rather than in words. Right, Ron said finally, so we watch. We watch, Harry agreed. The fire settled in the grate, and the warmth in Harry's chest settled too, deep and growing, the accumulated weight of 2 months of curses and jinxes and absorbed hostility, all of it feeding into something that was becoming quietly, steadily, without ceiling or limit, something the wizarding world had never properly had to think about before. Ready. Chapter 4. Teeth of the Wolf. December came in like a door slamming. The castle transformed overnight in the way that only Hogwarts could manage. One morning the corridors were autumn cold, and the next they were strung with enchanted frost and moving tinsel that reorganized itself if you got too close. And the great hall grew 12 Christmas trees between dinner and breakfast, and nobody seemed surprised by this. Snow fell on the grounds in heavy, purposeful quantities. The lake froze in a ring around the edge but stayed dark and moving at the center, which was either the depth of it or the squid, Ron said, and both explanations were equally plausible. Most students went home for Christmas. Harry didn't. He told Ron and Hermione it was because he wanted to spend more time in the library, which was true. He told himself it was because the Dursleys' house at Christmas was a specific kind of misery that made the cupboard feel like a holiday, which was also true. The actual truth underneath both of those was that with the castle emptied and the corridors quiet, he could move through it differently, open, attentive, mapping the spaces that were hard to map when they were full of people. He spent Christmas morning on the 3rd floor. The corridor itself was locked, which was a good lock, a proper enchantment with multiple layers, but the corridor adjacent to it was not locked. And the floor plan of the castle was something Harry had spent 6 weeks building in his head, and there was a gap between the official layout and the actual layout that amounted to a small chamber, probably a disused classroom, with a door that opened without resistance. From this chamber, through 2 feet of stone and one enchanted wall that was thinner than it looked, Harry could hear the dog. 3 sets of breathing. Heavy, or rhythmic, each slightly out of phase with the others. The sound of something enormous shifting its weight periodically, claws on stone, a low rumble that wasn't quite a growl, more like the sound a very large engine makes at idle, something alive and alert and deeply bored. Harry sat with his back against the cold stone and listened for a long time. He was trying to figure out what was underneath the dog. He'd established, through inference and through the conversation with Dumbledore, that whatever had been in the vault at Gringotts was now here. Dumbledore had moved it, which meant Dumbledore had reason to believe it was safer here than there, which meant either the defenses were more complex than a single 3-headed dog, or the something else below was significant enough that the dog was only the beginning. He thought about Quirrell, about the turban, about the warmth in his chest that was doing compound interest in the dark. Whatever was in that turban wanted what was below the dog badly enough, that Voldemort, because Harry had known for weeks that the thing in the turban was Voldemort, had known it with the same calm certainty he knew his claws would extend when he called them. Had taken a body, taken a teacher, taken a year of positioning and subtle maneuver. Voldemort was patient. The books called him many things, monstrous, brilliant, absolute in his cruelty, and Harry had read enough to know that patient was the most dangerous item on the list. You could fight a monster who charged. A patient one waited for you to make the mistake. Harry leaned his head back against the stone and thought, so I don't make the mistake. He was almost at the door to leave when he nearly walked into Professor Quirrell. Not from the 3rd floor corridor, from the staircase at the end of the hall, Quirrell ascending with a particular purposefulness that he shed the moment he saw Harry, like dropping a coat, the stutter and the tremble reassembling themselves over his face in the 2 seconds it took for him to process the encounter. "Mr. Potter," he said. What are you doing on this floor?" "Walking," Harry said. "This floor is not the 3rd floor corridor," Harry said. "That's locked. This is a different corridor." He looked at Quirrell with the clean, level attention that he'd found over the past months tended to make people profoundly uncomfortable without him having to do anything else. "What are you doing on this floor, Professor?" The stutter stuttered, the tremble trembled. Behind both of them very briefly, the thing that calculated with Quirrell's eyes did a rapid assessment of the situation. I had thought I heard something." "The dog," Harry said. Silence. "From the 3rd floor corridor," Harry added, helpful. "You can hear it from down here when the castle's this quiet. Big, 3-headed if the sound is anything to go by." He tilted his head. "Interesting thing to keep in a school." Quirrell's face was doing several things in rapid succession behind the mask of professorial fluster. Harry watched them happen with genuine interest, the calculation, the performance of alarm, the recalibration, the decision. You shouldn't be thinking about that. I think about everything," Harry said pleasantly. He picked up his bag. "Happy Christmas, Professor." He walked past Quirrell down the stairs and felt the man watching him the whole way down with an attention that had no tremble in it at all. A gift was waiting on his bed when he got back to the dormitory. Wrapped in brown paper, no card, a package the size and shape of something folded. He sat on his bed and opened it, and a silvery substance spilled out across the duvet like liquid light, weightless, almost invisible, the fabric of it somewhere between cloth and water and shadow, an invisibility cloak. And now there was a small note tucked inside the folds. Your father left this in my possession before he died. It is time it was returned to you. Use it well. No signature. Harry held the cloak in his hands and turned it over. He didn't put it on immediately. He looked at the note, at the handwriting Dumbledore's, the same as the lemon drop invitation, and thought about what it meant that the most powerful man in the wizarding world had held onto his dead father's invisibility cloak for 10 years and chosen to return it now. Now, when there was something under the school that needed guarding and a professor with a parasite conducting evening reconnaissance. Dumbledore gave him the cloak because he'd calculated that Harry might need it, and because giving it to him directly gave Dumbledore a way to feel like he was managing the situation, like Harry was a piece he was moving. The gift was genuine, probably. James Potter's cloak returned to his son real sentiment behind it, and also useful, 2 things at once, always 2 things at once. Harry folded the cloak and put it in his bag. He was at the door to leave when he stopped, turned back, opened his bag, took the cloak back out and put it on. The world went slightly different, cooler at the edges, the light behaving in the particular way it behaves when you're not quite in it anymore. He looked down and saw nothing where his body should have been, just the floor and the bed behind it. He stood there for a moment, then he went back out. The library at night was a different country. Madame Pince was gone and the restricted section was accessible only to the specific kind of desperation that ignores locked gates, which Harry had developed as a survival trait and now applied to academic inquiry. He slipped inside and moved along the shelves with a wand light held low. The cloak didn't muffle sound, which meant he moved the way he always moved in the cupboard and in the Dursleys' house at night, with the specific silence of someone who learned early that being heard had consequences. He was looking for something specific. The warmth in his chest, larger every week, growing with the inexorable compound patience of something that understood it at time, had been raising a question that he needed an answer to before he could trust what he was feeling. He needed to know if there was a limit. Not because he was afraid of what happened if there wasn't, but because not knowing the shape of a thing was operationally dangerous. He found it in the 7th shelf from the back. Principia Magica Fundamentalis, 6th edition, which was not in the restricted section for being dark but for being complicated. The kind of theory that sat at the intersection of magical biology and curse work, and had implications that the author had decided were better kept from general circulation. He found the relevant chapter, on compound core behavior and inversus damnum in genetically expressed magical mutation, and sat on the library floor with his back against the shelf and read. The theory was dense. The author, Aldrich Pemberton, 1743, a man who had clearly had opinions about sentence length, had documented 3 known cases of inversus damnum in recorded wizarding history. 3 people across 1,000 years of records who had exhibited the absorptive core property that Harry had spent 4 months cataloging in his own body. The first had been a Welsh witch in the 12th century who had absorbed curse fire from a siege of her village and grown powerful enough to scatter the attacking force through what the record described as an uncontrolled release of accumulated energy. Powerful, uncontrolled. The distinction mattered. The second had been a French sorcerer in the 16th century who had used his absorption deliberately and systematically, building over decades to a power level that Pemberton described as extraordinary by any metric of magical measurement, and who had died not from being outpowered but from a mundane fever at 63, which struck Harry as deeply funny in a way that probably said something about him. The third was described only in fragments. English 17th century, apparently capable of nonverbal magic by age 7 and wandless precision by 12. The records were incomplete. Pemberton called it the most significant instance in the documented history of the phenomenon, and then the chapter ended, and Harry flipped the page and found the next chapter was about something entirely unrelated, and the fragment just stopped. He sat with this for a while, 3 cases, spread over 1,000 years. And none of them with the additional factor of retractable bone claws, the physical magical intersection that Ollivander had called ancient, preverbal, something distinct from the absorption. Something that had been in his family line longer than the Potters had been keeping records, probably, something that Pemberton's subjects had lacked. He closed the book and put it back. No ceiling in the documented cases, no observed maximum. The French sorcerer had spent 60 years accumulating, and the accumulation had continued until he died. Harry stood, brushed the library floor off his robe, and pulled the invisibility cloak back on. 60 years of accumulation. Harry had been at Hogwarts for 4 months. He thought about the warmth in his chest, the current level of it, the weight of it, the way it had already begun expressing itself in things that should have been NEWT level and weren't, not anymore, not for him. He thought, I'm just getting started. The Christmas holiday ended and the students came back and the castle filled back up with noise and movement and the social complexity that came with 300 teenagers in a building that had its own opinions about where you were allowed to go. Draco came back from the holiday different. Not dramatically different. Not visibly different. But Harry noticed, the way he sat at breakfast now had a half-inch less performance to it. The way he occasionally forgot to arrange his expression when he thought nobody was watching. In the library on the first Wednesday back, Harry arrived to find Draco already at the table he'd come to use for his morning hour, and instead of leaving or making a show of leaving, Draco just sat there and kept reading. Harry sat down at the same table, took out his books, didn't say anything. Draco didn't say anything. After about 20 minutes, Draco said without looking up from his book, "My father sent an owl over Christmas." Harry turned a page. How was that? Instructive. A pause with weight in it. He's very interested in you, in what information I might have. Harry read his paragraph, then, what did you tell him? That you were difficult to read. Draco's voice was careful, measured, that the usual approaches hadn't worked, that he stopped, he didn't like that. What does your father do when he doesn't like something? Draco's quill tapped his page once, twice, he makes adjustments. Harry looked up from his book. Draco was still looking at his own page, but the muscles in his jaw were doing something specific, not anger, not fear, pressure. The particular tightness of a person living under someone else's constant assessment and finding the fit of it increasingly wrong. Draco, Harry said. Draco looked up. The information your father wants, it's not worth what it costs you to get it. Harry said it the way he said most things, directly, without ceremony, without cruelty, and you already know that. The library was quiet around them. Madame Pince was alphabetizing something behind her desk with the precision of a person who found this deeply satisfying. He's my father, Draco said. I know. It's not as simple as just, I know that too, Harry said. He went back to his book. I'm not asking you to do anything, I'm just telling you what I see. Draco said nothing. After a minute he went back to his reading. But that evening in the Great Hall, when Crabbe made a comment about Hermione within Draco's earshot, something low and unpleasant in the particular vein of cruelty that has been taught by observation, Draco said very precisely, don't. Crabbe blinked at him, so did Goyle. So did Harry from across the hall, though he didn't let it show. Hermione didn't notice. That was probably fine. Some things worked better without the weight of acknowledgement. January's cold was academic and committed. The castle pressed warmth inward, and classes drove toward the end-of-term assessments that McGonagall had begun telegraphing, with pointed references to chapters they'd need to know, when it matters, and Snape had announced outright with the specific joy of a man who appreciated formal performance metrics. Harry's potions assessment results came back first. Snape handed the parchments out personally, which was its own statement. He moved through the class distributing them with surgical precision, a single comment for each student, each comment calibrated to be exactly as cutting as useful. He put Harry's parchment on his desk without comment. Harry looked at it. 97%. In the margin in Snape's cramped handwriting, technically perfect. Irritatingly so, Ron leaned over. What you get? 97. Ron looked at his own parchment, which read 64 and contained a comment about cauldron temperature that was technically constructive. Bloody hell, he paused. That's brilliant, I mean that, genuinely. You got the doxer repellent right, Harry said, looking at Ron's paper. That's the hardest brew in the section. Ron squinted. How'd you know that? You were the only one in the class who got it right. Snape didn't comment on it, but the mark in that section is higher than your overall average, which means he had to give you full marks and didn't want to acknowledge it publicly. Ron stared at his parchment, then at the back of Snape's robes, then at Harry. He gave me full marks and didn't say anything. Yes, because he didn't want to admit yes. A rare, complicated grin moved across Ron's face. I'm framing this. From the front of the room, Snape appeared to know that something complimentary was being extracted from his marking system and disapproved of it enormously, though he couldn't identify the specific mechanism. The confrontation in the corridor happened on a Thursday. Harry had been expecting something. The Quidditch match had established a new dynamic between him and Quirrell, both of them aware, neither of them willing to move first. A Cold War in miniature conducted through classroom interactions and corridor encounters. Quirrell had been careful since Christmas, his assessments of Harry happening at distance, his probing subtle enough that Harry had catalogued 4 separate attempts to gather information through intermediaries, 2 students asking odd questions on his behalf, a portrait whose sudden interest in Harry was too targeted to be coincidental. And once memorably, a corridor cat that had sat outside Gryffindor Tower for 3 days and watched the door with a focus that no cat applied to anything that wasn't food. Harry had looked at the cat on the 3rd day and said, "Tell him I said hello," and the cat had left and not come back. So the direct approach when it finally came was almost a relief. Quirrell was waiting in the third-floor corridor. The actual restricted corridor door unlocked, the dog visible at the far end as a massive three-headed silhouette in the torchlight. How he'd gotten Harry to this floor was the slightly embarrassing part. A note in what appeared to be McGonagall's handwriting requesting a consultation on his transfiguration work, which Harry had questioned but ultimately followed up on because the McGonagall impersonation had been good enough to need ruling out, and ruling out turned out to be wrong, and here he was. He clocked it as a mistake the moment he walked through the unlocked door and found Quirrell instead of McGonagall. "That's a decent forgery," Harry said. "Better than I'd expect." Quirrell was standing in the middle of the corridor with his hands folded and no stutter at all. The turban was tight across his head, the folds of it more deliberate than usual, and the air in the corridor had a particular quality, charged, the hairs on Harry's forearms lifting slightly. "I thought it was time," Quirrell said, smooth and cold, "for an honest conversation." "All right," Harry said. He didn't move from the doorway. "You go first." Something moved in Quirrell's expression, the surprise of a man who had planned the scene differently. He'd wanted Harry deeper in the corridor, further from the exit. Harry staying at the door was a variable he hadn't accounted for. "You know what I am," Quirrell said. "You're Professor Quirrell," Harry said. "Defense against the dark arts, Hogwarts, partially occupied by a parasitic remnant of Lord Voldemort who has been using you to probe the school's defenses and gather information about the object below this corridor." A pause. "And me, you've been very interested in me." Quirrell's eyes had gone sharp and cold and entirely without performance. "You are a remarkable child." "I'm not a child," Harry said. "I'm an 11-year-old with 3 years of survival experience on most adults. What do you want?" "Cooperation." Quirrell's voice was smooth. "Persuasive. You misunderstand the situation, Mr. Potter. What lives in this turban is not your enemy. The world you've been given, the story you've been told about heroes and dark lords, it's a framework built by the people in power to maintain their power. You, of all people, should understand what it means to be told your place by people who benefit from you staying in it." It was good. Harry acknowledged that. Genuinely tailored, the Dursleys, the cupboard, Dumbledore's management of him, all of it weaponized into an argument that had real emotional leverage. "That's very well constructed," Harry said. Quirrell paused. The argument, it's using real things. Dursley's the way Dumbledore's been managing me, the framing of the narrative I've been handed." Harry leaned against the doorframe. "But you're making the mistake of assuming that because I understand I'm being managed, I don't understand what the alternative looks like." He looked at Quirrell levelly. "Your master tortured people into insanity. He murdered my parents. He runs on fear the way a fire runs on oxygen. He needs it to continue being whatever he is. That's not freedom from the framework. It's a different cage." The corridor was very quiet except for the dog at the far end, who was doing its slow three-part breathing and the faint crackle of the torch brackets. "You could be powerful beyond anything Dumbledore imagines," Quirrell said, and now there was a different quality to his voice, lower, coming from slightly behind the words, the sound of two vocal sources imperfectly overlapping. "The Lord could give you, I'm already beyond what Dumbledore imagines," Harry said pleasantly. "What else?" A pause, then, "We could take it from you." The air in the corridor changed. The charge in it thickened, the specific electrical feeling of magic being gathered, drawn in from the surrounding space the way a storm draws from the air. The thing in the turban was not Quirrell's magic. It was something else, older and more concentrated, and it pressed outward through Quirrell's body with a force that raised the light in the torches and made the shadows move wrong. "Last chance," Quirrell said, and the voice was almost entirely not his anymore. "Join willingly." Harry brought the claws out. Both hands clean and fast, and the warmth in his chest ignited. Not the small warmth of a classroom jinx, not the medium warmth of the Quitcher broom curse, but the full, deep furnace heat of a core responding to something genuinely threatening, something recognizing the proximity of the force that had killed his parents and touched his forehead and left a mark and had been trying to kill him again by degrees for 4 months. His magic came up like a tide coming in. Quirrell threw the first curse and Harry stepped sideways and it hit the doorframe and the wood exploded inward, and Harry was already moving forward, not back. Which was not what Quirrell expected, which was the point. He closed the distance in 3 steps and Quirrell threw a second curse at close range and it connected. The warmth went supernova. Harry staggered back a step, just one. The curse had been powerful, genuinely, darkly powerful, something from the upper registers of dark magic, and it hit his core like throwing a bucket of petrol on a fire. He felt it convert, felt the accumulated months of classroom jinxes and Quidditch broom jinxes and corridor incidents and Halloween spells surge together with this new massive input into something that pressed outward from his chest in a wave that wasn't visible but was absolutely felt. The torches flared. The floor cracked in a line outward from where he stood. The dog at the far end of the corridor made a sound like a thunderclap and all 3 heads came up at once. Quirrell stumbled backward. Harry was standing, breathing hard but standing, and the claws on his hands were out and the magic in him was roaring. "You just made me significantly more dangerous," Harry said. Voice was steady. He was mildly surprised by how steady it was and filed that away as information. "Do it again and see what happens." Quirrell's face was doing something he couldn't entirely control. The parasitic presence in him was pressing at the edges of his expression and finding that the expression wasn't sufficient to contain what it was feeling. Whatever had expected to happen in this corridor had not been this. This is not," the dual voice was fractured, both components unstable. "How are you?" "I absorb curses," Harry said. He started walking forward, slowly, not menacing, just inevitable. "They make me stronger. You have been cursing me in various ways for 4 months, every single time." He tilted his head. "I want you to think about what that means." Quirrell took a step back, then another. "I could hold you here right now," Harry said. "I could put these," he raised his right hand, 3 bone-white claws extended, into the door and hold it shut and call for Dumbledore, and this conversation ends very badly for you. He looked at Quirrell directly. "Or you can go." A pause that had its own weather. "He'll kill me if I," Quirrell's voice, not the dual one, just Quirrell's. A sound underneath the performance that was very human and very afraid. Not of Harry, of the thing in his turban. "Probably," Harry said honestly, "but that's between you and what you invited in." He stepped aside from the doorway, clearing the exit. "Go," Quirrell went. He moved fast, faster than a man of his size and theatrical frailty should have moved, and his robe snapped in the corridor, and then he was gone, and Harry stood in the 3rd-floor corridor with the dog at the far end, watching all 6 of his eyes and the cracks in the floor radiating outward from where he'd stood. He stood for a long moment. Then he let the claws retract, exhaled once, and sat down with his back against the doorframe. The magic in him was still loud the way a crowd is loud after something has happened, an ongoing residual roar that would probably take a while to settle. He put both hands on his knees and felt the warmth move through him in long, slow pulses, converting, building the new increment, folding into the existing structure and expanding it. He felt enormous, not physically. The physical dimensions hadn't changed. But the space inside him where the magic lived had grown significantly in the last 3 minutes. He thought, Voldemort just gave me more than 4 months of classroom accumulation in one curse. He thought, he's going to keep coming. He thought, good. He didn't go to Dumbledore that night. He went to the common room and sat by the fire, and when Hermione found him, she always found him. She had a specific radar for when he'd been doing something that needed processing. She sat across from him and didn't say anything for a moment, just looked at his face. "3rd floor," she said. "Yes." "Quirrell?" "Yes." She looked at his hands, his knuckles. "Are you hurt?" "Number," he paused. "He cursed me. And I absorbed it, a lot of it. More than anything previous." He looked at the fire. He was using Voldemort's power directly, not his own. Whatever's in that turban, it's not diminished. It's been building too. He put his hands flat on his knees. "Hermione, whatever's under the school, it's not just something he wants, it's something he needs. The stone, I've been reading about it." "The Philosopher's Stone," Hermione said quietly. "I worked it out last month. The properties, the elixir of life. If Voldemort is a remnant, a fragment, he can't sustain a physical form without the stone's elixir," Harry said. "Yes." She was quiet for a moment. "Then so he's going to try to get it." "He's going to try to get it soon," Harry said. "I pushed him tonight. He's going to feel pressured. He'll accelerate." He looked at her. "We need to be ready." Hermione's jaw was set the way it got when she was frightened and refusing to let the fright make the decisions. The three of us, Harry said. She nodded once. "Then I need 3 days in the library." "You've got them." Ron appeared at the portrait hole at that moment, breathless from the stairs, and took one look at both of them and said, "What did I miss?" "Sit down," Harry said. "I'll tell you." Ron sat. Harry told him, clean and sequential, without drama, the way he reported information that mattered. Ron listened without interrupting, which cost him effort, but he managed it. When Harry finished, Ron sat with it for a moment. "So you just walked toward him," Ron said. "Yes. After he cursed you. After he cursed me and made me significantly more powerful, yes." Ron stared at him. "You're mental, possibly. He's going to come back, isn't he?" "Yes. And when he does, we'll be ready," Harry said. Ron looked at Hermione. She nodded. He looked back at Harry. Then something settled in his face, not bravery exactly, not the performed courage of someone who wants to be seen being brave. Something quieter and more durable, the decision of a person who has found the thing he's willing to be afraid for. "Right then," Ron said. "What do we need to know?" The fire cracked and settled. Outside, the January snow was falling on the dark grounds and the frozen lake. And somewhere below the school, 3 heads were breathing in the dark, and somewhere in a turban that lived in a man who was running out of time, something ancient and diminished and furious was revising its plans. Harry looked at his friends, his actual genuine friends, the first he'd ever had, and thought about what was coming and felt the warmth in his chest like a second heartbeat. Steady, ready, waiting. Chapter 5. The Philosopher's Stone and the Beast Beneath It started on a Tuesday in June with a dragon. Not a real dragon, Norbert, who Hagrid had hatched from a black market egg in his wooden hut, and had been raising with the specific blind devotion of someone who had decided that a dragon was what they needed and facts were not going to interfere with that. Norbert had progressed from small and manageable to large and structural in about 6 weeks, which was the thing about dragons, they didn't plateau. Harry had helped move Norbert to Charlie Weasley's colleagues in Romania because Hagrid's hut had been approximately 2 incidents from catching fire, and because the whole situation had also accidentally revealed the location of the Forbidden Corridor to Quirrell through a chain of events involving Hagrid, a stranger in a pub, and a card game that Harry would have advised against had he known about it. The stranger had gotten Hagrid drunk, had asked about the 3-headed dog, had gotten an answer. Harry had pieced this together from Hermione's account of what Hagrid had told her, and the pieces had assembled themselves into a very clear picture in about 3 minutes. Quirrell, or whatever was directing Quirrell, had found a way past the first defense. The dog answered to music, a detail that was Hagrid's one modification to the original enchantment, a mercy built into the design. Play something and the dog slept, simple, elegant, and now compromised. Which meant the timeline had accelerated exactly the way Harry had predicted it would. He knows how to get past the dog, Harry told Ron and Hermione that night, the Tuesday before exams, sitting in a corner of the common room that had become, over 6 months specifically theirs, the table near the window that faced the grounds where the chair legs were slightly uneven and the light was good in the afternoon. Hermione had 3 notebooks open. Ron had a wizarding chessboard in front of him that he'd been ignoring. So it's soon, Ron said. Tonight or tomorrow, Harry said. He won't wait. He's been waiting since September and I pushed him in January, and every week since then is a week closer to something going wrong for him. He's going to move. Hermione closed the topmost notebook. She looked at Harry with the expression she'd been wearing increasingly over the past 2 weeks, focused, resolved, slightly terrified, not letting the terror make any decisions. We go with you. I know, Harry said. You were going to say you'd go alone, Ron said. I wasn't. Ron raised an eyebrow. I thought about it, Harry admitted, for about a minute. Then I thought about the fact that whatever's under the school has multiple layers, and some of them aren't going to be about fighting. And Hermione is better than me at puzzles that require calm and systematic thought, when something large is probably trying to kill me in the background. Hermione looked both complimented and slightly insulted, which was an expression she'd perfected. And Ron's good under pressure in ways that don't always look like it, Harry said. He looked at Ron directly. You stay calm when things go wrong, not everyone does. Ron opened his mouth, closed it. Something moved across his face, the particular quality of being seen accurately by someone who means it. Right, he said after a moment. Right, yeah. Tonight we sleep, Harry said. Tomorrow exams. If nothing happens, we have a day. If it happens before then, he looked at both of them, were ready. Neither of them argued. They weren't the kinds of people who argued with a plan they couldn't improve. It happened before exams. Harry woke at 2 in the morning to the specific quality of wrongness that had kept him alive in the Dursleys' house. The air pressure changed, the way sound moved differently, the castle feeling shifted somehow, like something in the deep structure of it had been activated or disturbed. He was sitting up and his claws were out before he'd fully processed waking. He sat in the dark, listened. The castle was not quiet. It was never fully quiet, it breathed, it settled, the portraits had their conversations. The staircases reconfigured in the dark with a grinding like geological time. But this was something underneath that, something that was not the castle. He got dressed in 60 seconds, cloak, wand, the invisibility cloak in his bag as an afterthought that immediately felt like the opposite of an afterthought. He went to Ron's bed first. Ron was awake, he'd been awake, Harry could tell from the stillness of someone lying in the dark not sleeping. Harry touched his shoulder once. Yes, Ron said immediately, sitting up. Then Hermione's dorm, which required a brief workaround involving the stairs that converted to a slide when boys tried to ascend them, which Hermione had anticipated and countered with a cleverly placed board. She was awake too. She was in fact dressed with her bag packed and 3 relevant books selected and her wand in her hand. I woke up 20 minutes ago, she whispered. Something's different in the castle. I know, Harry said. Let's go. The 3rd floor corridor door was open, not unlocked, open. The wood still in the frame but swung wide. The ancient protections on it showing the specific signs of a forced dissolution. The enchantments peeled back layer by layer with the methodical patience of someone who knew exactly what they were doing and had prepared for exactly this. The corridor beyond was cold and torchlit, and the door at the far end, the door Harry had heard the dog behind for 6 months, was also open. From beyond it came the sound of very large, very deep breathing. Slow, regular music, something barely audible, a charm cast and left running on the other side of the door. The dog was asleep. Harry looked at it, then at the trapdoor in the center of the floor between the door and the now sleeping Cerberus. The trapdoor was open, dark below. The kind of dark that was deep enough to have its own temperature. "He's already in," Ron said. "Yes." Harry looked down into the dark, nothing visible, just the drop and whatever was down there. "There's no going back from this one," he said. Not a question, not a dramatic statement, just the acknowledgement of a threshold. "Stop narrating and jump," Hermione said. Harry jumped. The drop was longer than expected, long enough that it moved from controlled to fast in the first few seconds, and then something happened below and the descent decelerated sharply, not from hitting the ground but from hitting something soft and enormous and alive. He sank into it like falling into a mattress made of vegetation, then pushed upward and out of it, and the plant let him go and he landed on his feet on the stone floor. Devil's snare. He recognized it from herbology, the instinctive grip, the way it tightened in response to struggle. He didn't struggle. He stood absolutely still in the grip of it, and the plant, confused by the lack of resistance, released him in about 4 seconds, and he stepped out of it as Ron landed above him and immediately panicked in the way that Devil's snare strongly encouraged. "Ron," Harry said, "still." "It's pulling, I know, still." Ron managed still. The plant let him go. Hermione descended and went through the same process with the focused deliberateness of someone who had read about Devil's snare and was very annoyed at herself for the half-second of instinctive panic she couldn't suppress. The chamber was large, stone, dark except for the bioluminescence of the plant and the faint light coming from the next door, which was open because Quirrell had been through it already, following the same path of sequential defenses toward the final room. "Same plan," Harry said. "We move through. We don't split up unless we have to." They moved. The second chamber had wings. Keys, hundreds of them, enchanted, flying in the dark space above them with the velocity and unpredictability of things that had been left alone too long and had developed opinions. A broomstick leaned against the far wall. The door across the chamber had a lock. Harry looked at the keys. At the door. He took 3 seconds to study the patterns, the altitude variations, the speed differences that indicated age and use, because the right key was the one that had been used recently and would show it in its flight path, slightly less unpredictable, slightly more worn. He took the broom and went up. He found it in 40 seconds. Chased it for another 20 because it had been enchanted to flee, and then he had it, and he dropped back to the floor and put it in the lock, and the door opened. Ron caught the broom. He was grinning. He couldn't help it. 40 seconds, he said. The pattern was obvious once you looked at the altitude. For you it was obvious. Harry held the door. Come on. The chess game was the one Harry had been dreading. Not because he couldn't play chess, he could. He'd been playing Ron for 8 months, and Ron was genuinely excellent. And the games had got him comfortable with the specific pressure of having all the weight on a single move. But the board in this chamber was the size of a room, the pieces the size of people, and Ron walked onto it and looked at the layout for 30 seconds, and Harry watched him do it. Ron's whole face changed when he looked at the board. The social anxiety, the slight self-consciousness, the particular quality Ron carried of being one of 6 remarkable siblings and not always sure where he fit, all of it went quiet. What was left was something clear and precise, a mind doing the thing it was best at, and it was remarkable. "I need to be the knight," Ron said. "You two, bishop and castle, there and there. Do exactly what I say when I say it, don't improvise." "Understood," Hermione said. Harry said nothing. He took his position and watched Ron direct the game with an authority that had no performance in it at all, just the clean confidence of a person who has found the thing they're actually for. The game was brutal. The pieces fought, not metaphorically, with actual force, stone on stone, and when a piece was taken, it was removed with violence. Harry moved where Ron directed and watched his positioning and trusted it completely, because Ron was right every time, the lines of the board visible to him the way flight patterns were visible to Harry, the same instinctive spatial intelligence applied to different problems. The moment came 20 minutes in. Ron looked at the board and at Harry and at Hermione, and something in his face did a thing that Harry recognized, the same thing that happened when you identified that the only good move cost something. "I need to let myself be taken," Ron said. "No," Hermione said immediately. "The king is open if I sacrifice the knight. Harry takes the queen, checks the king, game over." Ron's voice was steady. "I've looked at every other line, this is the only one." Hermione made a sound that was not quite a word. Harry looked at the board, ran the lines. Ron was right, he was completely right. "Ron," Harry said. "I know," Ron said. "It's fine, go. I'm coming back for you." "I know that too." Ron managed something that was in the vicinity of a grin. "Win first." He stepped forward. The White Queen descended on him with force and he went down hard, the stone floor, and Harry was already moving across the board, the final squares, his piece converting to endgame position, and he took the Queen and the King toppled and the game was done. Harry crossed the board to Ron in 4 steps. Ron was conscious, which was a relief so large it moved through him like a physical thing. Told you, Ron said from the floor, his voice was slightly strained. Go, Hermione stays with me. She goes back for help, Harry said, looking at Hermione. Both of you go back. Get Dumbledore if you can. Harry, if I need help down there it won't be the kind that arrives fast enough, Harry said. He looked at her directly. Find Dumbledore, tell him exactly what's happening. She held his gaze for a long moment, then nodded once, sharp and decisive. Be careful. I'm very hard to hurt, Harry said. That's not the same as careful. It's close. He picked up his bag. Go. He went through the door. The fourth chamber smelled like something burning. Quirrell was already at the far end of it, standing at the base of a wall of purple flames that blocked the way to the next room. Between him and the entrance, the door Harry had just come through burned black flames. In the center of the chamber, on a stone table, sat a bottle arrangement that Harry recognized from the description Hermione had once read aloud from magical puzzles and their historical context. A logic puzzle, 7 bottles. 2 safe passages, 1 forward through the purple fire, 1 back through the black. The rest were either useless or actively poisonous. Quirrell turned at the sound of the door. His face had changed again. No stutter at all now, no performance of nervousness or academic distraction. What was left was stripped clean, the face of a man who had gone too far to come back and had accepted the topology of that. Mr. Potter, he said, still following. Still leading, Harry said. He looked at the bottles on the table. The logic puzzle was not complex. Hermione had read it as a fun academic anecdote and he'd filed the solution away because he filed everything away. He crossed to the table without looking at Quirrell and picked up the correct bottle. Quirrell watched him. You solved it without testing. I know the puzzle. Harry pocketed the bottle. I know most things you've put in my path. He looked at Quirrell. The troll on Halloween. That was you redirecting it, wasn't it? Not Snape. You. A test, Quirrell said, to see what you'd do. I broke its legs and knocked it out. Yes, something moved through Quirrell's face that was not quite admiration and not quite fear and existed in the complicated space between. You are not what I expected, not what he expected. The pronoun carried a weight toward the turban. What did you expect? Harry asked. A boy with a famous scar, Quirrell said. Lucky, blessed by circumstance. Saved by his mother's magic and carried on that saving without understanding it. He looked at Harry with those stripped-clean eyes. Not this. And yet here we both are, Harry said. He looked at the purple fire. Are you going to try to stop me? I don't think I can, Quirrell said, and for one moment, one brief human, utterly unguarded moment, he sounded like a person standing at the edge of something and looking down. He told me to bring him the stone. He said nothing about what happened if someone like me came through, Harry said, if someone like you existed at all. The purple flames were hot. Harry could feel them from 6 feet away, the magical heat specific and intense. He looked at the bottle in his pocket, looked at Quirrell. Go back, Harry said. Take the other bottle, go back through the black fire and get out of the castle. Whatever he's promised you, it was always a lie, you know that. Quirrell's jaw worked. He's in my head, he said softly. He's been in my head for 2 years, I don't. His hands came up to the sides of his turban, pressed against it. I can't just, I know, Harry said, and he meant it. He felt the truth of it, the specific horror of a mind that had been occupied, colonized, made into a host. Quirrell was not Voldemort. He had been a person with a life before Albania, before the forest, before whatever conversation had gone wrong enough to end here. I know you can't, I'm sorry. Quirrell looked at him. Something in his face broke open, not tears, something quieter than that. Just break, he won't let me, he said simply. Even if I wanted to, he won't let me. Harry held his gaze for a moment, then he drank the potion and walked into the purple fire. The final chamber was small. That was the first surprise after all of it, the scale of it, the months of building dread. The actual room was modest. Stone walls, torches, and at the far end a mirror. Harry recognized it immediately from the description, the Mirror of Arist, which Dumbledore had moved here as the final defense, because what you desired was not always what you could reach. He walked to the mirror and looked into it. He saw himself, not a future self, not a changed self. Just Harry standing here in this chamber. And in his reflection's hand the Philosopher's Stone, a small red stone heavy in the reflected hand. And then his reflection reached into its pocket and put the stone away, and Harry felt something in his actual pocket grow suddenly heavy. He reached in. The stone was there, warm, solid, real. He looked at it in his palm for a moment, the Philosopher's Stone, the object that had pulled this whole year into shape around it, that had made Voldemort patient and strategic and ultimately desperate. He closed his hand around it. Remarkable. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, not Quirrell's, older than Quirrell. A voice that had been refined past the point of anything human, every unnecessary quality stripped away until what was left was pure, cold precision. Quirrell walked into the chamber behind Harry. His hands were at the turban, unwinding it slowly, methodically, like someone performing a ritual. Turn around, boy, Voldemort said, through Quirrell's mouth and then through something else, something older. Harry turned. Quirrell's unwound turban revealed the back of his head, and growing from the back of it was a face. The word face was technically accurate and deeply inadequate, gray and flat, the features pressed into skin like a death mask, the eyes red and vertical pupiled, alive with an intelligence that had survived death by deciding that death was a concept that applied to other things. Harry Potter, Voldemort said. Voldemort, Harry said, give me the stone. Number A pause, then something happened that Harry hadn't expected. Voldemort laughed, not with humor. With the specific, calculated warmth of a predator deciding to try a different approach. You are extraordinary, he said. I can see it now up close, the core, the mutation. You are something I have no category for, which means you have been wasted in the framework they have built for you. He looked at Harry with those red eyes. I offered my own blood to death to survive. You take what is thrown at you and become more. We are the same. No, Harry said. No, we use similar mechanics, Harry said. Different purposes. He looked at the face on the back of Quirrell's head with the same direct, measuring attention he used on everything. You survived because you were afraid of dying. I survived because the world kept trying to kill me and failing. He tilted his head slightly. Fear made you a parasite. The same circumstances made me something else. Voldemort's eyes narrowed. Semantics. Results, Harry said. Give me the stone, Potter. I don't want to destroy you. You are the single most interesting thing I have encountered in 50 years of practice, and I would rather you murdered my parents, Harry said. The chamber went quiet. An obstacle, Voldemort said. At the time, a necessity. They had names, Harry said. His voice was level. Not cracking, not hot with anger level, the way things are level when they've been thought about long enough to become solid. Lily and James. My mother bought me time by refusing to move. Killed her for it. He felt the warmth in his chest, all of it, the months of accumulation, the classroom jinxes and Quirrell's corridor curse and the enormous pulse of dark magic from the January confrontation, all of it present and ready like a tide at high point. I remember that every single day. Sentiment, Voldemort said. Sentiment won't. Give me the stone back, Quirrell said suddenly. Not Voldemort, Quirrell, his own voice ragged, pressed thin. He says he wants me to. Harry looked at Quirrell's face, the real one, the front one, pale and sweating and racked with something that was probably the most awful experience imaginable, being a house for something that didn't care about the house. Then Quirrell lunged for Harry's hand. His fingers closed around Harry's wrist. And the moment they did, both of them felt it. Quirrell screamed. His hand was blistering. Where his skin touched Harry's, the contact was burning him. Not from any intentional spell but from the properties of Harry's core, the concentrated, accumulated magical energy that had been building since September. The specific quality of a core that had absorbed months of hostile magic and had long since stopped being a simple core and become something else. Quirrell tried to let go and couldn't immediately. Harry closed his own hand around Quirrell's wrist deliberately. Not to hurt him. To give whatever was in Quirrell a choice. Leave him, Harry said. Leave him and go. The red eyes in the back of Quirrell's head were wide. Not with fear. Voldemort had burned past fear in whatever process had made him what he was, but with something adjacent to it. The experience of encountering something that defied his modeling. Your mother's protection, Voldemort hissed. She's still in you. The sacrificial magic. It's more than that now, Harry said. It's been building all year. He held Quirrell's wrist and let his magic do what it did. Absorb, convert, radiate, and he could feel Quirrell's skin burning and he could feel Voldemort pressing outward from it, trying to escape the contact that was burning the host, and he said, Leave him, I'm telling you once more. Voldemort spoke a curse. It hit Harry from 3 inches away. The warmth went absolute, not a wave, not a pulse. A total whole-body ignition, the accumulated months of everything detonating upward through his core in a single massive conversion. The chamber lit white, the torches blew out, the mirror cracked from top to bottom with a sound like a gunshot. Harry felt himself thrown backward, hit the wall, and he was on his feet before he'd consciously decided to stand up. Quirrell was on the ground, not dead. Harry checked immediately, still breathing, labored and shallow but breathing. The hands were badly burned. He was unconscious. The chamber was dark except for the light that was coming from Harry himself, faint, barely visible, the kind of thing you could convince yourself was torchlight if the torches were still burning, which they weren't. He stood in the dark and felt the magnitude of what was in his chest now. It was more than he had words for, not power in the way you'd say power about a spell or a curse, something foundational, like the difference between a river and the ocean. He had been a river all year, fed by every tributary of absorbed curse fire. And the last massive input had been the point at which a river becomes the sea. He could feel everything, the walls, the stone, the enchantments in the floors above, the dog sleeping 2 levels up, the fire at the edge of the grounds. He could feel Voldemort. A mist. A fragment. barely coherent, burning away from the contact with Harry's skin, desperately seeking anything to anchor itself to, and finding nothing. The room was stone and enchantment. The body on the floor was too damaged to re-enter. The mirror was cracked. The instruments of the defenses were inert. "There's nothing here for you," Harry said to the dark. "Go," the mist screamed. It was not a sound that existed in normal registers. It was felt more than heard, a frequency that hit the bones and the teeth and the inner ear all at once, the sound of something that did not want to die, refusing to die but unable to prevent it. It dissipated. Not gone. Harry didn't believe it was gone. Voldemort had survived worse. He had survived the killing curse through means Harry still didn't fully understand, and he had survived 12 years as nothing and had still found a way to Quirrell and through Quirrell to this room. But he was gone from here. Tonight, from this chamber and from this school. Harry knelt beside Quirrell, checked him again, breathing, badly burned, unconscious. He looked at the burned hands for a moment with the specific tightness in his chest that was not guilt but was in the vicinity of it. Quirrell had chosen this. And also Quirrell had been slowly consumed by something that gave him no real choices at all, and both of those things were true simultaneously. He picked the stone out of his own pocket and looked at it. Small, red, unremarkable in the dark except for a faint warmth that might have been the heat of his palm. This was the thing that had killed Quirinus Quirrell's life. The thing that had brought Voldemort to this school. The thing he'd kept from all of it, not by being clever or lucky or heroic in the performed sense. By being what he was. He closed his fist around it. Then the door at the top of the chamber opened and light poured in from above, and running footsteps, and Dumbledore descended with his robes moving behind him and his wand out and his face showing the first expression Harry had seen on it that was not managed. It was fear. For one clear second, just one, Albus Dumbledore was afraid. He looked at the chamber, at Quirrell on the floor, at the cracked mirror. At Harry standing in the dark with a faint light on his skin and the Philosopher's Stone in his hand. "Harry," he said. Harry held out the stone. Dumbledore crossed the chamber and took it from him. He looked at it in his palm and then at Harry with an expression that had moved from fear to something more complicated, something that contained relief and awe, and underneath both of them the specific feeling of a plan arriving at a conclusion the planner hadn't fully anticipated. "Are you hurt?" Dumbledore said. "Number Quirrell, alive, he'll need the hospital wing." Harry looked at the man on the floor. "Get him help." "Yes." Dumbledore turned and raised his wand and sent a Patronus, a silver phoenix which made a certain kind of sense, up through the chambers with instructions Harry couldn't hear. Then he turned back to Harry. "And Voldemort?" "Gone," Harry said. "Not destroyed." "Gone?" Dumbledore looked at him for a long moment in the dark chamber with the cracked mirror and the extinguished torches. "How do you feel?" he said, and the question was not casual, it had weight to it, the specific gravity of a man asking something he genuinely needed to know. Harry thought about the answer. "Large," he said finally. Dumbledore looked at him steadily. "Yes," he said quietly. "I imagine you do." He put the Philosopher's Stone in his pocket, and the gesture, small as it was, contained a whole conversation. The thing that Voldemort had wanted, neutralized, protected, will be handled. And the thing that Harry had done the way he'd done it is noted and will need to be discussed. "Your friends," Dumbledore said. Ron took a hit from the chess set. "He's in the chamber above. Hermione's gone for help." Harry picked up his bag. "Let's go up." He went up first. Dumbledore followed. Behind them the dark chamber settled back into its stillness, and the mirror of Arist reflected nothing in its cracked surface, and the warmth in Harry's chest moved with him up through the dark, breathing steady, enormous, entirely his own. Chapter 6. After the claws come out, Harry woke in the hospital wing to sunlight. Not the gray, committed light of winter or the iron light of exam season, actual summer sunlight. The kind that came through the tall windows of the wing in long warm columns and landed on the white bedsheets with the uncomplicated brightness of something that had no interest in what had happened in the dark below the school. It was the most honest thing Harry had looked at in weeks. He lay still for a moment and took inventory. This was a habit so old it had no origin point. The Dursleys' house. The cupboard, every morning beginning with a quiet assessment of the state of things before committing to the act of being in the day. He checked himself. Ribs, shoulders, hands, the deep interior space where his magic lived. All present, all more than present. The accumulation from the chamber had not diminished overnight. If anything, it had settled more completely the way newly poured concrete settles into its final shape, and what it had settled into was vast. He sat up. Ron was in the bed to his left, asleep, one arm bandaged from the chess piece that had taken him down. His chest moved with the uncomplicated rhythm of someone sleeping deeply and without nightmares, which Harry found disproportionately reassuring. Hermione was in the chair beside Ron's bed, also asleep, with a book open face down on her lap. She'd fallen asleep mid-page. The book was about advanced magical theory because of course it was. Madame Pomfrey materialized from behind a curtain the moment Harry's feet touched the floor. Bed, she said. I'm fine, Harry said. I'll be the judge of Madame Pomfrey. He looked at her with the patient directness he used when he needed someone to hear him without fuss. I heal faster than normal. I've been doing it since I was 4. I'm genuinely fine, how's Quirrell? She looked at him for a moment with the expression of a woman who had been overriding people's self-assessments for 30 years, and had met, possibly for the first time, someone whose self-assessment was accurate. Professor Quirrell is in a separate facility, she said carefully. His condition is complex. His hands. Among other things, she set her jaw. Mr. Potter, sit back down and let me examine you properly or I'll write to the headmaster. He already knows I'm fine, Harry said, but I'll sit. He sat on the edge of the bed. She ran her diagnostic spells, a sequence of them, efficient and thorough, and her expression moved through several stages, none of which resolved to surprise exactly. More to the medical version of filing information she'd need to reconsider later. Your magical core readings, she said finally in a very precise voice, are outside the range of my standard charts. How far outside? She looked at her clipboard, at him, at her clipboard again. I'd need a specialist instrument and a second opinion before I could give you an accurate number. What I can tell you is that they are significantly elevated from the intake readings I took in September. She paused. Significantly. Good to know, Harry said. She made a sound that managed to express 3 different opinions simultaneously, and retreated behind her curtain. Hermione woke up approximately 30 seconds later with the specific alertness of someone who had only been resting the surface of their mind. She saw Harry sitting on the edge of his bed and sat upright immediately, the book dropping off her lap which she caught without looking. You're awake, she said. You're still here, he said. I came back last night. After Dumbledore, she stopped, started again. After I got Dumbledore and came back, Ron was being treated and I stayed. She looked at him with eyes that were entirely clear. No performance of casual, no playing it down. Are you all right? Yes. Really? Really? He looked at his hands. Madame Pomfrey says my core readings are off her charts. Hermione's expression did the thing where it wanted to be excited about the data and also was fairly sure that expressing excitement about the data was the wrong response given the context and was managing the conflict in real time. How far off? She needs specialist equipment to measure. I'll bring books, Hermione said immediately, then caught herself. After later, when things are settled, she folded her hands in her lap. Harry. What happened in the last chamber? After Ron and I, he told her. Clean and sequential the way he'd told Ron about Quirrell back in January, the mirror, the stone, Quirrell's unwinding turban, Voldemort's face. The conversation, the curse, the light in the chamber going dark and Voldemort dispersing like something burning away from contact it couldn't survive. Hermione was very still through all of it. When he finished, she sat with it for a moment, turning it over the way she turned over difficult equations. He touched you, she said, Quirrell, and your core burned him. Yes, because of your mother's sacrifice, the sacrificial protection charm, partly. Harry looked at the sunlight on the floor. I think by last night the protection was one component of a much larger thing. The warmth has been building all year. By the time Quirrell touched me, whatever I'd accumulated was, he paused, looking for the right word. It was hostile to Voldemort specifically, not to people generally, to him. He looked at her. I think my mother's magic became a foundation, and then everything else I absorbed built on top of it. Hermione was quiet for a long moment. Then, the sacrificial protection charm is love-based. Technically, it's not a charm in the conventional sense, it's a recorded property of an extremely specific magical act. It leaves a residue in the blood of the survivor. She was doing it now, the rapid-fire processing following the logic out to its edges. If that residue was part of your core's architecture from the beginning and then your absorption property began feeding energy into that architecture, it all runs on the same thing, Harry said. She looked at him. Love, he said, slightly awkwardly because he was 11 and saying the word love out loud about his own magical architecture felt strange. My mother's choice is in the foundation of all of it. The absorption, the healing, the all of it. It's all built on what she did. Hermione was looking at him with the quiet, clear-eyed intensity that she reserved for things she found genuinely extraordinary and was not going to diminish with too much response. That's, she said carefully, the most elegant magical theory I've ever heard. Don't tell anyone I said it, Harry said. They'll put it in a book. Too late, she said. I'm already taking notes in my head. Ron made a sound from the next bed which resolved into him rolling over, which resolved into him being awake. He blinked at the ceiling, at Harry, at Hermione, at Harry's hands. Did we? He said. Yes, Harry said. Ron exhaled. It was the exhale of someone who had been holding something since a chess piece knocked him off his feet and had not been able to let it go until this moment. Brilliant, he said, and meant it without any of the irony that words sometimes carried. You were brilliant, Harry said. The night sacrifice. I'd worked through the lines myself and there wasn't another way. You found the one move in about 30 seconds. Ron looked at him and for a moment did not say anything, and the silence held the particular quality of someone receiving a compliment that costs the giver nothing but lands like it cost everything. Because it was said precisely and without decoration. Cheers, Ron said finally, quietly. You're both going to make me cry, Hermione said, and I refuse to do that. You've already been crying, Ron said, looking at her. I was upset about the devil's snare, she said, completely separate. Dumbledore came at 10 in the morning. He came alone, which was a choice that carried its own message, no McGonagall, no other staff, no witnesses. He came in the way he did most things, with the appearance of casualness masking precise intention, and he brought a bag of sweets that he offered to all three of them. Ron took 2. Hermione took 1 and looked at it suspiciously. Harry didn't take any. Dumbledore settled into the chair that Hermione had vacated without being asked. He looked, Harry noted, tired in a way that was not the tiredness of a bad night but the tiredness of a person whose plan had arrived at a place slightly different from where they'd aimed it and who was processing the implications. How are you, Ron? He said first. Brilliant, Professor, Ron said, arms a bit sore. Madame Pomfrey tells me you'll be fully recovered by this evening. Dumbledore looked at him warmly. The chess game, the way you managed that board, McGonagall will want to discuss it with you at some length. I'd prepare yourself for that conversation. Ron went slightly pink. Dumbledore looked at Hermione. Hermione, the devil's snare, the logical puzzle. Flitwick was moved nearly to tears in a positive sense. I mention this because I want you to know. He paused. And I want to say separately that your decision to come and find me rather than attempt the final chamber yourselves showed a quality of judgment that is, in my considerable experience, fairly rare. Hermione held his gaze. I wanted to go with him, she said precisely. I made the choice I made because Harry asked me to, and because he was right that Voldemort's presence was beyond what I could help with down there. And if he'd been wrong, Dumbledore said, with genuine curiosity. He wasn't, Hermione said. Dumbledore smiled at that. Then he turned to Harry. Harry looked back at him. The stone, Dumbledore said, is safe. It will be destroyed. Good, Harry said. Nicholas Flamel and I discussed it last night. He and his wife are very old, and the end of the stone means the end of their elixir, and the end of that means, well, a pause. He said, with the serenity of a man who has had 600 years to think about death, that it would be like going to sleep after a very long day. Dumbledore's voice had a quietness in it that was genuine. I find I am still working toward that serenity myself. A beat of silence in which Harry decided that was probably a true thing and that Dumbledore saying it was not unimportant. Quirrell, Harry said. Dumbledore's expression moved. He will survive. The damage to his hands is significant and some of it may be permanent. The other damage, he paused carefully, the 2-year presence of Voldemort in his mind that will require a different kind of care. The mind healers at St. Mungo's are skilled. He looked at Harry. What happened when he touched you was not something you did intentionally. I know, Harry said. I held his wrist on purpose. What came from that, I wasn't aiming it. Dumbledore folded his hands. Your core at that point had accumulated enough that the passive radiation from physical contact was significant. To a host for Voldemort's fragment specifically, the effect was combustive, Harry said. That's one word. Dumbledore looked at him with those blue eyes that had seen many things and were still in the process of categorizing this. Harry, I owe you several honest conversations, and I am aware that I have been managing information that was yours to have. He said it without deflection or performance of humility. He just said it directly. I told myself it was to protect you, that is true. It was also partly to manage a situation I had been planning for many years, and in that management I underestimated what you already were. The hospital wing was quiet. From outside the windows far below, Harry could hear the grounds, someone doing something in the greenhouses, a bird, the distant lap of the lake. Tell me the rest, Harry said. The prophecy, Dumbledore said. Harry waited. There is a prophecy, Dumbledore said. Made before your birth, by a woman who did not remember making it to me in the upstairs room of a pub during a job interview. His voice was very level. It concerns you and Voldemort specifically. It speaks of a child born as the 7th month dies with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord. It speaks of the Dark Lord marking him as his equal, and it speaks of one of them unable to live while the other survives. He held Harry's gaze throughout. Voldemort heard part of this prophecy and acted on it. He came for your family. He chose you specifically from among other possible candidates, and in choosing you, in marking you, he made the prophecy about you. The hospital wing was very quiet. So the prophecy made me special, Harry said. No, Dumbledore said, and his voice carried something firm. Voldemort made you a target. What you have become, he looked at Harry with an honesty that stripped away the management and the calculation and left something underneath that was simply true, has nothing to do with the prophecy. The prophecy said power to vanquish. It said nothing about what kind. It said nothing about bone claws or absorption properties or a core that burns away parasitic fragments on contact. A pause. Prophecies are maddeningly general, Harry. The specifics, all of them, are yours. Harry sat with this. He turned it over. He checked it against the shape of what he'd already worked out, the way you check a key against a lock, not whether it fits perfectly but whether it explains the shape of the hole. You were going to tell me this when, he said, when I thought you were ready. Dumbledore said it plainly. Which was, I understand now, the wrong criterion entirely. You have been ready for things considerably longer than I accounted for. Yes, Harry said, not angry, not performing being not angry. Just the straightforward acknowledgement of a true thing. I'll do better, Dumbledore said. Harry looked at him for a long moment. At this man who was brilliant and loving and had been running him like a chess piece and felt genuine affection for him simultaneously. At the tiredness in his face and the genuine assessment in his eyes. I know you will, Harry said. I'm going to hold you to it. Something moved through Dumbledore's expression, relief possibly, or the specific thing that happens when a person who is used to carrying weight alone is told that the weight has been noticed. Yes, he said quietly. I rather think you will. The end-of-year feast happened 3 days later. The Great Hall transformed with Gryffindor's colors, scarlet and gold. After a points declaration that McGonagall made with the controlled satisfaction of someone who had been counting toward this for months. Harry sat between Ron and Hermione, and the hall was loud. And the food was the kind of feast that Hogwarts produced with the specific generosity of a building that had been holding back all year and had decided to stop holding back. Across the hall, at the Slytherin table, Draco Malfoy sat with an expression that was working hard at being neutral. He caught Harry's eye once, briefly. Neither of them did anything with the eye contact, no nod, no challenge, no performance. Just a moment of mutual acknowledgement that contained about 6 months of complicated information and let it sit there without resolving. Then Draco looked away and Harry looked away and Ron pushed a plate of roast potatoes in front of him. Eat, Ron said. You've been eating like someone who's been unconscious for 3 days. I was unconscious for 1 day, still counts. Hermione was talking to Neville on her other side, who had done something remarkable involving Draco on the night of the stone, had stood up in the common room and told them they couldn't go, that they'd lose Gryffindor more points, and had gotten 10 points for extraordinary nerve from Dumbledore during the points announcement, which had been the exact difference between Gryffindor and Slytherin's final total. Neville had looked at the points announcement with the stunned expression of someone who had received a consequence they'd entirely earned and still somehow wasn't expecting. Harry looked at him now, Neville, who had stood alone in the common room against 3 people and done what he thought was right. He thought about what that cost, for Neville specifically, for the boy who second-guessed himself in every class and lost his toad every week and stood up anyway. He leaned past Hermione. Neville. Neville looked at him with the particular alertness of someone who still half-expected Harry Potter talking to him to lead somewhere uncomfortable. The claws, Harry said quietly. You've seen them, you haven't said anything to anyone, Neville blinked. Of course I haven't. Why not? Because Neville looked at him with the simple clarity of someone who hadn't realized this needed explaining. Because it's yours, it's your thing, it's not mine to talk about. He paused. And honestly, after you knocked out a mountain troll in November, I thought, well, whatever Harry's got going on, it's his business, isn't it? Harry looked at him for a moment. Thanks, Neville. Neville went slightly pink and turned back to his food. Ron had been listening. He looked at Harry over his pumpkin juice. He's good, isn't he? Yes, Harry said. He really is. The Hogwarts Express going south was different from the Hogwarts Express going north. Going north had been new, the excitement of it, the strangeness, the sense of moving towards something that didn't have a shape yet. Going south had the bittersweet quality of a thing that had found its shape and was now temporarily leaving it. Harry, Ron, and Hermione had a compartment to themselves for the first hour, the way they'd been managing privacy all year, Ron with his elbows on the table, Hermione with a book she was actually reading rather than using as a prop, Harry with his legs stretched out and his head against the window watching the countryside move. Next year, Ron said into a comfortable silence. Next year, Hermione agreed. Whatever happens next year, Ron clarified, we deal with it. Obviously, Hermione said, I'm just saying it out loud. Harry does that thing where he plans without telling you the plan and then executes the plan and you find out what the plan was while it's happening. That's not, Harry started. The troll, Ron said. I went in first because, the chess game, you knew what the plan was before we sat down. Someone had to, the thing with Malfoy in January. The thing with Quirrell at the Quidditch match, the night on the 3rd floor when you stayed behind. Harry closed his mouth. I'm not saying you're wrong, Ron said. You're almost never wrong and it's deeply annoying. I'm saying next year, whatever it is, we're in it from the start. Agreed? Harry looked at him. Then at Hermione, who had put her book down and was watching him with the expectant patience of someone who had the exact same request and was letting Ron make it because Ron had said it better. Agreed, Harry said. Something settled in the compartment, not dramatically. Just the quiet finalization of something that had been building since a train platform in September, three people recognizing that what had formed between them was not circumstantial or provisional but actual. Neville knocked on the compartment door. Harry waved him in. He came in with Trevor the Toad, who appeared to have developed an understanding with Neville over the year based on Neville knowing exactly which pockets Trevor would try to escape from, and Trevor knowing that Neville would catch him regardless. He sat down with the ease of someone who had been invited into a space before, and the compartment adjusted around him with the natural fluidity of a group that had room. The train reached King's Cross in the late afternoon, the platform materializing from the magical side of the barrier as Harry stepped through it. The steam, the crowd, the ordinary world settling around him like a coat he'd taken off in September. The Weasley family was there in the organized chaos they moved in, Mrs. Weasley pulling Ron into a hug that Ron received with the practiced slight embarrassment of a person who also clearly loved it. Hermione's parents found her, and she went to them with a precision and warmth that suggested she'd been looking forward to this while also looking forward to going back, which seemed about right. Harry stood on the platform with his trunk and his owl cage, and watched the reunions happen with the particular quality of someone who is genuinely glad for other people's gladness, while also being someone who does not have a version of this moment waiting for them. Vernon was there, standing at the barrier. The red face, the enormous size of him, the suit that was slightly too small because Vernon had ideas about suits that didn't quite correspond to his body. He saw Harry and his face did the thing it did when he was performing displeasure while also feeling something underneath it that he'd never examined closely enough to name. Harry crossed the platform to him. They looked at each other. Harry with his trunk, Vernon with his hands in his pockets, the barrier behind them and the ordinary world in all directions. Potter, Vernon said. Uncle Vernon, Harry said. Good year. Yes. Vernon made the sound he made when he was trying to sound uninterested in something he was actually slightly curious about. Nothing, no, nothing blew up or you didn't do anything. I stopped an 11-year-old version of one of the most dangerous dark wizards in history from getting an object that would have let him return to full power, Harry said. And I absorbed enough curse fire over the course of the year to make me one of the most magically powerful people in the country. He said it the way he said everything matter-of-factly without drama, just the accurate report of a situation. Other than that quiet year, Vernon stared at him. I also made friends, Harry said. Real ones for the first time. Something moved across Vernon's face that was too complicated for Vernon to have words for and too human to be entirely suppressed. He opened his mouth. Harry looked at him steadily. There will be rules, Vernon started. No, Harry said. Vernon blinked. I beg your no, Harry said again, calm and absolute. I'm going to stay with you for the summer because it seems to be necessary and because Dumbledore has reasons I'm prepared to accept for now. But there won't be rules, not the old ones. He held Vernon's gaze without aggression, without performance, just the simple, unmovable quality of someone who has decided where they stand. No cupboard. No skipping meals, no locking me in, no telling me to pretend I don't exist. He waited a beat. In exchange, I won't be difficult, I'll be quiet, I'll help in reasonable ways, I'll be exactly as present as you want me to be and no more. Vernon was doing the thing where his face went through several colors in sequence, red then deeper red then a kind of mauve that was new. Now listen here, Uncle Vernon. Harry brought the claws out, not threateningly, just present. 3 bone-white points from each hand, quiet and controlled and real in the afternoon light of King's Cross. And he held them there for one moment for Vernon to look at, and then he retracted them, smooth and clean. I'm not going to hurt you, he said. I never was, but you should know what I am, clearly, so there's no confusion about how things stand between us. Vernon was very still. Good summer, Harry said. That's all I want, manageable, quiet. And then in September I go back to Hogwarts and we don't have to negotiate again until next June. Vernon opened his mouth, closed it. Somewhere nearby, a pigeon walked across the floor of King's Cross with the particular confidence of a creature that has decided platforms are its territory. Vernon watched it because it was something to look at that wasn't his nephew standing in front of him with the stillness of someone who had fought Voldemort last week and found it manageable. Dinner's at 6, Vernon said finally. His voice was slightly flattened, the voice of a man who has located a face-saving arrangement and is taking it. I'll be there, Harry said. He picked up his trunk and his owl cage and followed his uncle through King's Cross toward the car park, and the ordinary world was loud around him with the noise of people going home. And the magic in his chest moved with him like a second heartbeat, vast and building and his. He wrote to Ron that night. Not about anything dramatic. Ron had asked in their last compartment hour whether Harry had ever played proper wizard chess outside of the school, and Harry had said no, and Ron had said he should, and Harry had said he would, and now he was writing to set up a game in mid-August when Ron's brothers would be around. Because Ron had mentioned the Weasley house with the kind of waving away description that meant he was proud of it and worried Harry would find it insufficient. He wrote, "August sounds good. I've been reading chess theory. I think I might be able to give you an actual game by then." He paused, then added, looking forward to it. He sent it with Hedwig, who disappeared into the summer dark with the composed confidence of an owl who had decided she approved of her person and was going to continue doing so. He sat at the narrow desk in Dudley's second bedroom, his room now, apparently. Petunia had taken Dudley's overflow toys out of it while Vernon and Harry had been in the car park, and looked at the summer dark outside the window. The wizarding world would spend the summer talking about him. He knew this the way he knew most things, from inference, from the shape of what had happened, from the specific quality of the crowd in Diagon Alley last September, and the way it would translate to a story that the wizarding newspapers could spend months with. The boy who lived again. The prophecy child again. Harry Potter again. Let them talk. He had no interest in managing their narrative. He was 11 years old and he had survived a year at Hogwarts that had included a mountain troll, a broom jinxing Voldemort, and a stone's throw from death in a dark chamber underground. And he was more than all of it, more than when he'd arrived, more than Voldemort had expected, more than Dumbledore had planned for. Not invincible. He knew the difference. There would be more years, more encounters, more of whatever Voldemort's dispersed fragment was doing in whatever dark corner it had retreated to. The prophecy said one of them couldn't live while the other survived, and Harry had lived alongside that fact for 1 year now without it making him smaller. He brought the claws out. Left hand, 3 points, white in the desk lamp's light. He looked at them the way he'd looked at them in the common room firelight on the first night of his first year, with the same inventory-taking attention, the same clear-eyed accounting of what they were and what they meant. They were the same claws. He was not the same person. He put them away. He picked up his Transfiguration summer reading. McGonagall had set optional summer work that was technically optional and practically necessary if you wanted to stay ahead, and opened it to the first page and read. Outside, the street was quiet. A car went past. A dog barked twice and stopped. The ordinary world in its ordinary configurations, doing what ordinary worlds do, which is to say, continuing regardless. And inside the ordinary house on the ordinary street, in the room that had been a storage space for toys and was now his, Harry Potter read until midnight, and the warmth in his chest was constant and enormous and present. And in September it would be stronger, and in the year after that stronger still, and whatever came next, whatever emerged from the dark corners that dark things retreated to, would find him exactly as it had left him. Ready, unafraid, waiting. The story of Harry Potter did not end in a chamber beneath a school. It was only beginning there, the first chapter of something the wizarding world had no name for yet, something that would spend the next 6 years being forged and tested and adding to itself with every curse that tried and failed to leave a mark. Voldemort's fragment drifted in the dark and did not stop existing, but it remembered what it had touched, and for the first time in 50 years it was afraid of a specific thing. That fear would make it careful. Harry was counting on that.